Three, two, one. Hello, this is Lazy Bones, joined by Antic. Today we're going to be talking about, I guess we'll be talking about both Inside Out movies since the most recent one came out. So, yeah, yeah, how do you feel? But I guess like, do you want to be the introduction to the discussion, or I guess like tell your thoughts about Pixar and whatnot?
Yeah, I guess we'll talk about it. There's a new Inside Out movie coming out. It's Pixar's first sequel since Toy Story 4, and this is obviously the follow up to the very beloved original film that came out in 2015. And it's easily one of the biggest animated films that's come out this year so far, and it's getting massive critical acclaim. The box office numbers are terrific. And yeah, we both saw this movie a few days ago, and
Did you want
I
to talk about the
was.
first one first, or
Yeah, I do want to talk about the first one for a bit because this is
yeah, let's
definitely
do.
an important crown jewel within Pixar's catalog and animation itself. I think this is a very good movie that I think we should talk about.
Yeah, I was thinking because I think it's good because like I remember like last year I talked about with like Citizen Hal since like the remake of The Little Mermaid came out. We decided what, let's just talk about the original too because we didn't know what else to talk about. We didn't just want to talk about that movie at the time. But I guess like
Mhm.
since we're like we might as well pair the original as well since like it's good for context and also gives us an excuse to ramble about it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is definitely one of our favorite Pixar movies. This is one of my favorite movies in general. I adore Inside Out. I think it's a masterpiece, and I really do think it's one of the best animated films ever made. I think it's the best animated film of the 2010s. Honestly, that's my take.
Hmm. Oh, I mean, I would say definitely like it's still absolutely one of my favorite animated movies. At this point, I don't know if it's my favorite of the 2010s yet, or it's anymore because I'm still kind of an Into the Spider Verse kind of guy. But this is
hmm
absolutely like my favorite Disney release, like not from like any other like studios. Like this is absolutely what I think is their best movie. Not even just under Pixar, but under Disney, the company in general, in like that decade.
Yeah, I agree. It's also the best Disney release. If I had to put up the best film that came out from Walt Disney Animation Studios in that last decade, I'd pick Zootopia, but I think Inside Out is easily my favorite, Disney release, and I also do think it's the best Pixar film of the last decade. And I love Coco. That's a close second, but Inside Out is just, oh, it's so good. It's so good. I just love it. I love it. And
You
yeah,
want to go more into it, like as in like what was your first like experience like your sort of like your relationship with this movie like as like before it came out, like were you like
mhm.
really excited for it or
Yeah, I was excited for it. I remember first hearing about this movie because when I was like 11, 12, I was all over Pixar. I mean, I still am all over Pixar. And I was doing research, and I remember that Pete Docter was directing a movie that was gonna go inside of people's minds. This was going to be his follow up to Up, and Up was a massive movie. It was a huge hit. It won 2 Academy Awards. It was nominated for Best Picture. Many people
and I
know
think best
that.
screenplay too, I think it was nominated for.
Yeah, it was nominated for Best Screenplay, and many people already know this, but for those that don't, Up is my favorite Pixar movie. I think it's my favorite animated film ever. It's one of my favorite movies. It's definitely a massive movie that really, is a part of me. I love that movie so much. I think it's so perfect, and it really speaks out to me, much like Inside Out does, if not more. I think Up is just my favorite animated film. Period. I love it so much. So when I hear that Pete Docter was directing a new film, I got really excited. And this was also going to be Pixar's first movie after their gap year in 2014. For those that don't know, The Good Dinosaur was supposed to come
It was
out
supposed to
after
release
Monsters
that year.
University. Yeah, it was supposed to release after Monsters University. It was supposed to come out in 2013. Then it got pushed back to 2014, and then there was still all that story troubles, and you had John Lasseter meddling with it, and the movie got
You had the
delayed to.
notorious John who was like yes just all over the process, and then like I think
Yeah,
they even like they replaced the director too, and like
yeah,
I
they
think
did. They did. Bob Peterson was the original director. He was the
He was the
co-director of
co-director
Up.
of Up too. So like,
Mm-hmm.
why did he do that?
Um, I
Yeah,
don't
was it
know.
a leave of absence or I don't know. I mean,
No,
I
it
was
wasn't
looking
a
a
leave
bit
of
into it,
absence.
a bit of a while ago. I was looking into it, but
From what
yeah,
I
I
hear,
mean,
they couldn't crack the third act. That's the story I've heard. I don't know if that was fully true, but Peter Sohn eventually took on the reins. He was initially the co-director of this movie, and then he was basically given the full ship. And bless his heart, he tried. I really think he tried to try to make it work, but he was basically handed a sinking ship movie. I still think the movie is decent overall, but it is not one of my favorite Pixar movies. I'm at least glad Sohn was able to show he could really direct a great movie from the ground up because he made Elemental last year, and I really loved that film. But yeah, The Good Dinosaur really struggled, and it was delayed to late 2015 when all that madness was going down. So Inside Out was Pixar's first movie after Monsters University, and I remember seeing the trailer for it, the first teaser, where it showed all those like clips from Pixar films, and then you got to see the emotions, joy, sadness, anger, disgust, and fear.
I remember
And
that too. Actually, I remember like that teaser, like had they released like that was such an interesting idea for me because like I would have been like pretty young when I saw that teaser, so like
mm-hmm.
I was like, that's interesting, like the meet the emotions inside your head sort of thing. So and like it was showing all the clips from like here, there were plenty of happy or sad or moments of anger or disgusting moments or scary moments in Pixar. Then like
Mm-hmm.
there that was basically their selling point for the movie.
Yeah, and it was a great selling point because Pixar films
Yeah.
are driven by their emotion, especially the sadness. Like everyone talks about how Pixar movies make people cry, and like by that point their legacy was pretty secured. You had, Wally and Up and Toy Story 3 were the two big ones because those were the real big tearjerker movies from Pixar at that time. And it was a great hook, which is saying a lot because I remember reading that when Pete Docter pitched this movie to Disney execs, they were worried that this movie was going to be exceptionally hard to market towards children.
Oh yeah,
And
that was one big challenge. I was watching a video about it today that was like naming like that was talking about like the history of it. They
mhm.
also said this is probably gonna be almost kind of a challenge to like get people interested in the movie because it seems like I think even after its can premiere, which was like still well received, I think they were kind of debating whether it's the type of premise that would appeal to children.
Yeah, I think they were really worried that this was going to be too mature for children, which is crazy to think that looking back on it 9 years later because the movie was a massive hit. It was one of the top 10 highest grossing films of that year. And it's
Oh, it
probably one
was.
of the few films that was in that top 10 that is still held up because you don't see a lot of people talking about Jurassic World or Force Awakens there anymore, or at least
Yeah,
not
looking at
as
the top 10,
fondly.
yeah, I'm looking at the top 10. Like, I was thinking about that earlier and how it's like, it's one of the two, like, movies in the top 10 highest grossing movies of that year that is not a sequel, part of an existing franchise, or a reboot, or based on basically any existing IP.
Yeah, and
I
it's
guess, like,
and it's
the
also
other
one
one I
that's
would.
just still talked about pretty fondly. Like people still love it. Like Force Awakens, people loved it at the time, but now with the
No one
benefit
really
of
likes it anymore. Then
yeah,
you have,
because
like,
of the
some.
sequels. Yeah,
And then you still have, like, Jurassic World and Minions, which are just, like, garbage.
yeah.
The Martian is like the
Minions.
only other
Jeez.
one I'd probably consider a quote unquote original, even though it is based on a book. But who reads
Mm-hmm.
books anymore?
Yeah. But yeah. But getting back to the original, getting back to Inside Out for a moment. This was definitely an interesting film for Pixar when they made it at the time because the start of the 2010s was really strange for them. Toy Story 3 was a
Mhm.
massive hit. It got critical acclaim, 2 Academy Awards. It got nominated for Best Picture, much like a huge hit.
It was the highest grossing movie of that year.
Yeah, it was, and rightfully so. I still think it's my favorite Toy Story movie. I love Toy Story 3. It's a great
Oh, I
movie,
do
and it
too.
definitely set Pixar up for a great decade. And then Cars 2 happened the next year and was just a
Yeah.
massive train wreck. And
Yeah. And that's when like I think that's when people realized that like John Lasseter was like becoming he was probably known afterwards as like the George Lucas of animation, that like he was held in high regard because he helped revolutionize the art of cinema in some way. You know, like Toy Story basically did for
Hmm.
animation what Star Wars did for sci-fi and Hollywood summer movies in general. But
Yeah,
then, as you
it's where
see him, surrounded by less yes men, you know, you realize. I mean, with more yes men, I should say.
yes.
You start to realize that what he's actually like, his creative process and everything.
Yeah, like I went back and revisited parts of Cars 2 and also just how he handled its reviews, and it was so immature, and it really just showed that he
I do
was
remember. I
exceptionally
saw that
delusional.
clip. Have you seen like the clip of him like he's reacting to like the
Bad
how
reviews
like
at
he's responding
Paris,
to the bad reviews? Well, we got a lot of bad reviews on Toy Story and
and I'm
Cars. Well,
like,
that's just a straight up lie.
yeah,
You just
like
lied to
Toy
your
Story.
audience.
Yeah, Toy Story. Who I don't know anyone that dislikes the first Toy Story, or
That
I
never
haven't
got
seen
bad
any
reviews
bad
when it came
reviews.
out. Like Cisco Labor
No.
gave it like high praise, like
Yeah,
too.
Siskel
Yeah.
named it one of the best movies of that year. And
And Cars, sure, Cars was held in like less high regard than their other movies, but it still got mostly good reviews though. So
yeah.
that's like stretching the truth as well. It's
Yeah, it
basically
really was stretching the
it
truth.
reminds me of like M Night Shyamalan, like how he reacted to like he was like interviewed about the bad reviews The Last Airbender got, and he was like, well, you know, go back to my first few movies, you know, like first movie I made when I was 21 got Savage, then the next movie got Savage, and then that made Sixth Sense, which like didn't get so much Savage, but definitely not good reviews.
Yeah, like the ego that you get when you get something that's very, very overpraised can get really into your head, and that's also obviously something that happened. And like you look at his defenses for Cars 2, and it's so ridiculous because he's like, it's a brilliant follow up. It's a spy movie. It's the most beautiful film that Pixar has ever made. To the point which even visually, there's other movies that they made beforehand that I think would have
Wally
rivaled
looks
that.
way better. Up looks way better, you know,
Wally,
too.
yeah, Wally, Up, Ratatouille looks gorgeous.
Ratatouille looks gorgeous. Yeah, like this
Yeah,
the shots of Paris, like
hmm
I think they take advantage of their locations better than Cars 2 does, honestly.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't this Cars 2 is not like a bad movie visually. It's just
Yeah,
like
visually it's stunning,
it,
but narratively
that's it
it's a
though. That's
mess.
like that's
Like,
all it has though.
yeah, like narratively, I, I've seen that movie. I cannot explain that plot for the life of me. That spy story is so complicated. I have no idea what that whole thing with the gas and the energy thing is. Like, it's so complicated and it's so weird because the thing that Pixar is great at is that their stories are so simple and yet there's a lot of complicated pieces on top of that, and yet this is just a story that's so complicated. Like, I was an
Even an
adult when
adult
I
would
first
have a
saw
hard.
this movie, and I had a hard time following. I can't imagine how kids could understand this.
Yeah. I mean, yeah,
But
I
yeah,
know like there's a lot of things like especially in like older Pixar movies where like there's a lot of mature subtext to it that you don't really get like when you're a
hmm
kid, but like you're
but
still able there's still stuff there you're able to enjoy. Like The Incredibles is still like a great superhero movie for families cuz like there's like emotional moments you can resonate with, but there's also a lot of interesting deep themes going on like with like you know
yeah,
the erasure of superheroes and how they're forced to live under and you know
yeah, and Bob's
even
midlife crisis and whatnot,
midlife
and
crisis and like the corporations like his boss is basically just like tormenting him and everything, something that you could relate more to as when you're a struggling adult, but you know
yeah,
it's still
but
got a lot, it's still a
it's
crowd
still
pleasing
adult.
movie.
Yeah, it's still an adult film, but the thing is, the story in that movie is really simple to follow. Like, you can
Yeah,
easily follow what's going on. Like it follows Bob. He used to be the superhero, Mr. Incredible. Like, superheroes are now illegal. He's forced to, work in an insurance company, and he seemingly has a happy family. He has 3 children. He has a beautiful wife. Seems he should be happy, and yet he's in this massive midlife crisis because he is so unhappy. He misses being a hero, and also he's just working for a pretty scummy corporation. And then all of a sudden, when he's fired, this mysterious agency led by a woman named Mirage comes up, and eventually it's revealed to be a bigger conspiracy because it's being driven by a wannabe hero named Syndrome, who used to be, Buddy, used to be Incredible's
his
diehard
biggest
fan,
fan.
Buddy.
I am your biggest fan.
Yeah.
You know
My
those were his
name is
words.
not Buddy! and,
And there's also like there's even like scenes like that an adult can latch onto that I think when you're a kid you probably don't really think about it that much, but like you still can enjoy stuff in it. Like
Yeah,
The Incredibles I think is like probably the Pixar movie that's gotten only better with age,
I
as
agree.
I've grown older.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, that and
definitely.
Ratatouille definitely, which is funny because they're both Brad Bird movies.
Yeah, they're both Brad Bird films. It's funny because Incredibles was Brad Bird from the start. Ratatouille was actually a project he inherited. That was one of
Yeah,
his. That
it
was.
still feels like a Brad Bird movie
It still
in and
feels
out
like a
though.
Brad Bird though film. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely the last Pixar film where they had the director changeover that escaped unscathed, essentially, because that's also one of the biggest things that was going on in the 2010s that essentially Pixar has finally moved away from, and I'm glad they have done that. But anyway, getting back to the 2010s thing. So yeah, Cars 2 was a flop. Then Brave came out. It got
Brave was
lukewarm
like
reviews, and
Yeah, Brave, like Monsters University came after that. And even though like it also got lukewarm reviews, I will say like I think after rewatching it amidst like the other sequels, I think that's the one I think after besides like the Toy Story sequels, that's probably the one I probably appreciate the most because I think it takes a different approach than the original, and I also think that I think what it's trying to say is very very interesting. I think it has a great message at the end. There's like
yeah,
it definitely has like it's like negatives. Like there's some dumb kitty humor I'm not into, and like I'm just I mean there's like some cliches of course, but like I think at its core I appreciate like how it's trying something different than the other sequels. Than I mean I
mm-hmm.
know it's prequel, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, here's my hot take. I never have minded any of the Pixar sequels except for Cars 2. That's the only one I've really disliked. And yeah, I do think Monsters University is actually a really good movie. I agree with you. One thing I really like about that movie is the ending because it goes against what we expect because Mike and Sully, do not graduate with honors. They both get expelled because Mike broke into the door lab and Sully cheated at the scare games. And there's that amazing scene at the lake where the two are talking and they
Oh, I love that scene.
are, they think they're both, and Mike thinks he's a failure and Sully confesses, Mike, I don't know how you feel, but you're not the only failure here. And it's a great scene, and it's a great message for
Yeah.
kids because it showcases, sometimes the path that you want to have is not going to play out the way you want it to, but you can make the best of it, and sometimes things will work out. And I really love that ending. I think it's a very
Yeah.
smart ending, and I like that it goes against type. But yeah, I really like Monsters
It also
University.
shows
I think it's.
it also
I'm,
shows that like even if like if you're even if like no matter how hard you try, you might just never be fit for your dream job. But that doesn't mean you're a
yeah,
failure though. There's still plenty of other stuff you're good at surrounding your dream job. Like Mike was like the one that actually made Sully the scarer that he was. So it
yeah,
shows that he absolutely does have talent and he's worthy of working at Monsters Inc.
yeah, and I really love that ending. But yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, Monsters University definitely got lukewarm reviews when it came out. I remember it was at a 78% for a while. It's actually gotten much warmer reception nowadays, and I'm glad it has because I've always really
I
liked
think
it.
yeah, that's one. I think that's probably one that's like definitely caught up in terms of like people have definitely appreciated it over time.
Yeah, I think it's also definitely a good showcase that Dan Scanlon was on track to becoming a great director at Pixar, and then he eventually showcased it more with Onward a few years later, which I really loved. But yeah, I really like Monsters University. I definitely have grown on that one more. Brave, on the other hand,
I'd
I've
put it
definitely soured on.
Yeah,
But
Brave. I actually rewatched that like this year too. I used to like it mostly because like my younger cousin really liked it, and I guess like I was a kid, so I didn't really have the most high of taste. Even though I liked most of the same movies or shows I like now, but now with like a more critical adult lens, like I kind of see like I mean, it's like fine, I guess. It's just very
mm-hmm.
generic princessy movie, especially like it's funny because that same year, like Wreck-It Ralph came out, and that had
Yeah,
like the plot or the creativity that a Pixar movie would, and like Brave just feels like kind of a worse, I don't know, Tangled or something like that.
yeah. Brave. I mean, I still like Brave. I own it, but it's definitely one of the few Pixar movies I own that I would not see myself rewatching. And I think a large part of that was also just because of Brenda Chapman's firing from that movie.
Yeah, that's like
And
insane too. She's the co-director of The Prince of Egypt. How
yeah,
do you
she's a
fire her?
genius. She was the mastermind behind several story artist moments on movies like Beauty and the Beast. She was the head of story on Lion King, and he took her off that fucking movie, and it
And
still
she was supposed to
shocks
be
me.
she was supposed to be like the first like solo female Pixar director, and that would have
Yeah,
been a great. It also could have been like a nice subversion of like Disney princess movies too. Like these are like it kind of. I guess there's elements of it there, but it's just like not fully realized.
yeah, it really is not fully realized, and I feel so bad for her. I'm glad Pixar has definitely taken the failure of what happened with Chapman to heart, because after Mr. Misconduct was fired out of the company. There's been more female directors boosting up, and they really learned that lesson after Turning Red, which was a huge hit for Domi Shi. I mean, she got a huge promotion. The film's producer, Lindsay Collins, got a huge promotion. There's a lot more female directors working at the studio, and yeah, I'm really glad that after Turning Red, Pixar really realized that what happened on Brave should never happen again. Because, yeah, that was a very, very grave miscalculation on their part to fire Brenda Chapman. But anyway, getting back
I
to
feel like
Inside
it kind
Out.
of. Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, what were you saying?
I was
It's
gonna
okay.
say like I think it also kind of further contributed to like the cultural sort of like confusion on which is a Pixar and which is a Disney animated movie. Because like you have no idea how many people I've met that say like Moana is a Pixar movie, right? Or something like that.
Really?
And like yeah, I mean I've met a ton of them. Like it's because like well because like I guess some people probably think Brave since Brave's like a Pixar movie they think Frozen or Tangled's a Pixar movie too. So it's like
Mm,
contributing to like the confusion factor. I think that if Disney really like just kind of continued their hand drawn department, I think like they would not be like having that kind of like what's a Pixar, what's a Disney movie anymore.
yeah. But
Yeah,
yeah, anyway, getting back to Inside Out. So this came out in 2015, and yeah, I remember when this thing came out. And it was
I
a
saw it on
massive
opening day
movie.
actually.
I did too. I was on vacation when that happened, and I explained this in my actual video review. But I had literally just finished middle school when this movie came out, and I was about to start high school. And middle school for me was a really really horrible time for me. It was a very low point. I was really depressed. I had gotten through a lot. I was bullied by a lot of students and even teachers at my middle school. There was a
Oh, I'm
really
sorry about
toxic
that.
environment that was going on, and I just didn't have that many friends. Thank you. But yeah, that this movie was really one of the most comforting films that I needed at the time. Like a movie that really embraced the message of sadness and that it was okay to be sad. And the fact that a movie was this brave to admit that is honestly astonishing. And I'm always just amazed at how structurally perfect this movie is. This is one of those animated films I've studied. I studied it for a story class earlier this year, just breaking down the plot beats, and it really struck me just how much it works and also just how good the world building is. I'll get to the world building in a bit, but
Yeah.
this is a movie that is so ingenious and it has every functional piece to it that makes it so innovative, and it really just showcases just how masterful an animation studio Pixar is.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that I really appreciate about it in general. Another thing that I really liked about it, especially for its time, is how much more expressive the animation is. Because like I
Mm.
think I mentioned this. Funny enough, I kind of mentioned something similar to this when I made like that Chicken Little video I did. But like, I guess for this one, I appreciate how it's like much more. You know, it's much more. It leans a lot more towards like it being an animated movie, in terms of like how like bouncy and expressive and vibrant everything is
Yeah,
compared to like
it's
most animated movies for its time. Like you watch Moana, which is like, look how photorealistic these visuals are, and like that's not a bad thing. But after a while, I just want an animated movie to kind of feel more cartoony.
yeah, I totally get that. This is definitely where you can see Pete Docter really leaning more into abstraction. If there was an artist I could compare this to, it's probably Chuck Jones, Maurice Noble. I really feel that influence in Inside Out and also in Soul, because there's a lot of that, uh, like everything is very, not perpendicular and whatnot, especially in that abstract thought scene where the characters just get more and more abstracted. That basically is a giant Maurice Noble tribute, because if you look at Noble's art, it's very much like that scene in the movie, and it's so creative and it's so revolutionary. And I remember when they were making that movie and they were showing people scenes that they were like, wait, this is a Pixar movie? And I really like that this is definitely one of the first movies that was at the studio that really could show them playing around with this animation beyond pushing photorealism, which is definitely something we've seen a lot more of this decade too, including this sequel, which we'll get to more in a bit.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, also, I just like, I also think it's like a neat like detail, like how even like all the characters like have their own like unique way of like moving and stuff like that. Like Joy is obviously very she moves very fast, and like Sadness is very like she's like of course very slow, or not she doesn't very not very I guess I don't know how you would describe it, but not she doesn't
She's
move a
very
lot, I guess.
sluggish, very sluggish.
Sluggish, yeah.
Yeah.
She's honestly, I would say that Joy is actually probably one of my favorite animated movie characters. She
Yeah.
reminds me of like she's basically, even though she's like, even though she kind of like boasts, like you could argue she's boasts a bit of toxic positivity that she eventually learns not to push near the end. She kind of is like, I like to think of her as kind of like a caring, kind of overprotective mother of Riley.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and that's a great way to look at it. And I do agree with you. I think she's a fantastic protagonist. I think she's easily one of my favorites in an animated film. And an overprotective mother is actually the perfect comparison, because that's exactly what the filmmakers were going for with these emotions. The emotions were overlooking Riley almost as if they were their parents, because that's essentially what the filmmakers were doing when they were looking at their own children. Because the idea of Inside Out spawned from Pete looking at his young daughter Ellie, because one thing that he noticed was that she went from a very like overjoyous, excited, energetic kid, and then she became very quiet and shy, and he was wondering what's going on inside of her head. How did she go from that to that? And that's where the idea of Inside Out came from, essentially. So the idea that you were comparing Joy to an overprotective mother is actually the perfect mindset, because that's exactly what Pixar was looking at the character like. She's a character that was basically an overprotective mother, essentially, and really trying to over-nurture Riley into becoming this character that was falsely happy all the time, and trying to keep Sadness away from it, because all she thinks she does is just cause tantrums and screams and cries all the time, when in reality there's a lot more going on to it than just a simple temper tantrum.
Yeah.
And that's really the genius of this movie, is just how it looks at these characters, and the fact that it's a movie that's a message about essentially how we view our children, what is going on in their minds as they change, as they get older, and, realizing that they're soon not going to be young anymore, and that they're going to be entering into a different state of place in their lives. And it's really amazing that a movie can look at that and approach that in such a mature and thoughtful way, while also just being really creative and funny as well, because there's a lot of great comedy in this movie.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's a lot of good jokes that especially got to me on my recent like rewatch. I like the part when like they're at Trophy Island, and like everyone's a winner, and then like
Sadness
just has a ribbon that says
prize.
Participation Award.
Yeah.
I think Sadness is actually the funniest character, actually.
Yeah. She remember the funny movie
like,
where the dog dies?
Yeah, but I also think like some of her other lines are really funny. Like I like when she thinks that our parents don't like us anymore. Goodbye, family. Hello, loneliness.
Yeah.
I think like especially since that character I think could get pretty grating after a while, but thankfully like she never really does.
No, she never
So I think
does.
that's
And
definitely
I think that's also just a huge attribution to how good the voice actors are in this movie. This whole franchise is just perfectly cast. Every single actor who plays the emotions, and even the people in the outside world like
the human
Riley's parents.
characters.
Yeah, the human characters. It's just so
I never
perfect.
knew I never knew for a long time that Kyle MacLachlan plays Riley's dad.
Yeah, that's Kyle MacLachlan. Yeah, he's really
The
good
guy
in
from
this
the David
movie.
Lynch movies.
Yeah, yeah, it's so funny. And
I wonder what David Lynch thinks of Inside Out now.
I don't know. but uh
Yeah,
but yeah, I really just have to highlight how good this cast is. Phyllis Smith was
I really
actually
like Amy Poehler especially.
Amy Poehler is so good at Joy. She was actually the last one chosen for this movie, believe it or not, which is kind of astonishing to me because you'd think that her being Joy is like an obvious choice because she's such a bubbly personality. And I remember reading that Phyllis Smith, who voices Sadness, was actually the first choice. And I actually do know the story of how she was chosen. Um, so
Oh
Jonas
yeah.
Rivera, who's the producer of the movie, went to see a movie called Bad Teacher, which is this not great.
Oh right.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
this not great Cameron Diaz comedy where she plays a really
Yeah.
grumpy lady who's a teacher who wants a breast implant or something. And there's a scene where she goes to lunch with her friend who's played by Phyllis Smith, and Smith has this very like timid voice, like, yeah, but it's mandatory, like that kind of voice. And Rivera was watching it, and then he texted Pete and he said, "I think I found our sadness," just after seeing that scene.
That's really funny. She was also in The Office too, which like
Yeah.
pretty similar to Mindy Kaling,
Mm-hmm.
who played Disgust in it.
Yeah.
I don't know how do you I don't know. So like, how do you feel about the other? I guess I really Lewis Black seems pretty like an obvious
Lewis
choice
Black
for
is so
anger.
funny. I mean,
Yeah,
him getting grumpy at the triple dent gum running
yeah.
gag is just like, "Did I ask for the gum commercial?" Yeah,
Bill
it's so
Hader
good.
is. I think Bill Hader. I think has a lot of anxiety in real life that he utilized for his performance as
Yeah,
fear.
yeah, and very panicky motion. And when it comes to other characters, I think the other one we should probably talk about that's not an emotion is Richard Kind as Bing Bong because
Oh yeah, Richard Kind.
he is so good
Richard
in
Kind.
this movie. I remember reading that he based his performance off of John Candy's performance as Del Griffith in Planes, Trains, and
Oh, I did
Automobiles.
watch the video on that today too. Like where they were talking about that too. He does. Now that I do think about it, he does remind me of John Candy a little bit.
Yeah, I could see if
His
Candy was
performance in
still
it.
alive, I could have seen him in this role for Bing Bong. But Richard Kind is so good here. I think this is probably my favorite role I've seen him in because this is the one that really utilizes him so perfectly compared to other films I've seen him in. And one thing that I do like about the Bing Bong character is that, and this is something that I definitely noticed when it came to Pixar at the time. This is also is that they very so easily could have made him a villain, like go down the twist villain route. And I'm
Oh,
so
actually, it's funny that you mentioned that because like when I first watched it, I thought he was gonna be a twist villain.
yeah, I remember seeing some people think he was going to be a twist villain, and I'm so glad that he wasn't. It definitely is a notable piece in Pixar's puzzle because starting with this movie, there's been a few more villains that we've had since, but mainly Pixar has moved away from making outright villains to characters that are more antagonistic, like they're just doing their jobs. Because I remember reading that Pete Docter himself doesn't like villains. Even though he created characters like
Had two
Randy and
villains
Waternoose and
and Randall
Muntz.
and Mr. Waternoose and
Charles
yeah, the
Muntz.
villain in Up.
Yeah,
Charles Muntz, yeah,
yeah,
the guy named after the villain to Walt Disney in real life.
yeah. And he said that he didn't like villains because they weren't a reflection of reality. And he said that, characters don't wake up like, oh, what evil thing am I going to do today? Mwahaha. More like, he's like, villains don't think that way. They think what they're doing is right, even though they know they're not. And that's a great way to look at a villain. And I think that's essentially how I think all people should write villains. You're not writing them as evil characters that do dastardly things and know they're evil. You write them as people that are insanely flawed and are doing bad things. They just don't know they're doing bad things. And they just think they're
Yeah,
right for what they've done because no one in reality thinks they're being an outright baddie. They think what they're doing is right. And that was something that I know he was moving away from in Inside Out and also Soul, because there was no villains in Soul, because Terry was
Yeah,
essentially an
some people say
antagonist.
that. Some people. I remember like remember Ellis Mark said in like his Soul like review or something like that. He said like, what about this villain that has like 3 seconds of screen time or something like that. But I was thinking like Terry's not a villain though.
Yeah,
He's just doing his
yeah,
job.
she's not a villain.
She
She's
is.
just
She is. Sorry.
no, no, you're okay. Yeah, she's just doing her job. She's trying to sound the count right because the count's off. And
Yeah.
yeah, that was something that I definitely noticed for Inside Out, that I really liked that they didn't put an outright villain in this plot. Except, I mean, if there was an antagonist to this movie, it was probably Anger, because he was the one that did a lot of the damage in the film with, causing
Yeah.
the islands to break up, and also he's the one that puts the idea in her head to run away. And but even
I
then,
hate when people say that Joy is the villain though. Like
yeah,
that
Joy is
really
not the
grinds my
villain.
gears.
Yeah,
She's not the villain.
like she's not the villain. Like
If she's the villain, then I remember I heard someone say a long time ago that Riley's the villain, and when what the fuck, doesn't make any sense.
no, that doesn't make any sense. There's no villain in Inside Out. There's an antagonist, and that antagonist is Anger. But even then, he realizes his mistake. Like as soon as she turns off the cell phone when she's about to board the bus, and he sees that the island is still continuing to crumble. He goes, "This is
Yeah.
madness. She shouldn't run away." And
Yeah, no, I think there is actually a villain in the movie. You see, like when the credits eventually roll, there's an executive producer credit that names John Lasseter. So I
oh,
think he's the villain.
yeah, well, which is funny because I think another thing that makes this a pretty important film for Pixar, he didn't actually have that much involvement in Inside Out, believe it or not. Um,
Makes sense.
he was actually busy working at Walt Disney Animation Studio. So basically, Pete was left on his own to work on this movie, and that really allowed him to make the movie he wanted to make. And also, he hired a lot of like female storyboard artists on this movie. I mean, one of the big ones that got her big break on that movie was Domi Shi, and eventually, she went on to direct Bao, which he helped executive produce, and then afterwards, Turning Red. So a lot of female storyboard artists and even people got their big breaks on that movie. Production manager Dana Murray went on to produce Soul for Pete Docter. She won the Academy Award for that with him. So it was really a big step up for Pixar, not just showcasing that it could allow more female talent within the studio, but also just showcasing that they really did not exactly need John Lasseter anymore. Like his involvement at the studio wasn't necessary, and that he was definitely more of a
John
hindrance.
Misconduct. Go back to making Planes 4 and 5.
Yeah. Do you remember that they were trying to make a third Planes?
Yeah, they did. I remember it was dated for like 2019 at one point.
Yeah, it was going to rival Endgame.
Disney
Endgame, believe it or not. It was just.
I think Disney Toon, I think they closed down before they could even make the movie. So
yeah, I think they were.
I think it's funny. I still remember when the first Planes movie came out. I think that was like the first time I felt like maybe I'm getting too old for animated movies. But I know it was like 11 at that time or something like that.
I was 13. I remember seeing that. I still went to every Pixar movie. I've seen every Pixar film.
Yeah, I still did too.
Except for
maybe that movie was just such a bad idea that I thought animated movies suck now or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, but yeah. Anyway, but yeah, that Inside Out really was an important movie for Pixar. Not just because it showed they could still have the talent, and not just because, it was another phenomenal movie in their catalog, but also it really just played the pieces straight that, A, they could have a lot more rising talent within the studio, and B, also, they could get Lasseter out of the picture and still make amazing movies without him. And obviously, nowadays we can definitely see that. And yeah, Inside Out really just is a movie that is so important, not just for animation and Pixar, but just in general, because this is a movie that really does a lot more. And that's not even getting to other stuff in the movie. Like everyone, like there's also the brilliant score by Michael Giacchino, which is one of his best.
Oh yeah.
And the sound design too. I think that doesn't get enough credit. The sound design in Inside Out is so good. It was done by a sound designer named Ren Kleiss, who's actually David Fincher's sound designer, and he's also done.
Oh really?
Yeah.
I know the David Fincher's like his usual composers like Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross went on to do Soul. So like I think that's
Yeah,
kind of interesting. They
yeah, and it was that,
yeah,
and it's funny you mentioned that because Kleiss actually was the one that recommended Reznor and Ross to Pete Docter to do Soul, and Reznor and Ross had always wanted to do a Pixar movie, so that was like a
interesting.
perfect marriage. But yeah, Kleiss has actually become Pixar's go-to sound designer. He's gone on to do Incredibles 2 and Toy Story 4 and Soul, and he's basically done every movie of theirs since Turning Red. So he's basically become their go-to sound designer. And his work in the first Inside Out is really good because he used a lot of crazy ideas for the sound work. Like some of the ideas for the memory swifting around is actually the sound of crabs walking on the beach, and the microphone is just buried under the sand. So it's really creative
That's
stuff. Um,
really good. I think it's also just a very like cleverly set up story. Like I think it definitely makes sense that like it the story, it's a very clever choice to have it center around like Riley when she's like moving to a new location because that can really be a big change in someone's life, and of course it comes with
yeah,
a
it
lot of
really
emotional
does.
baggage and that kind of thing. And it's around the time when she's like transitioning too to like she's like just 12. She's barely like she's almost approaching her like
Yeah,
teens
yeah.
basically. I
The
think
first
she
the beginning
starts
of the
off
movie
as
she's
11,
11,
but
and the last
you know,
line of the movie is, "After all, Riley's 12 now. What could happen?" Well, puberty could
what could
happen, but
happen?
we'll get to it.
Yeah, 11. Yes, 11 is
Yeah.
still a pretty big change, and so I mean, 11 is a pretty big, you know, probably a time when
Yeah.
people start to kind
Yeah,
of
it
change a little
definitely was.
bit
Yeah, it's definitely
emotionally. I guess
yeah, it's definitely an era where you start to
mature, I should
mature and you
say.
start to realize things are not going to be the same cuz I was in 6th grade when I was 11 and going to 12, and I was about to start middle school, which again was that really turbulent period in my life. So watching a movie that showcased that weird changeover and just showed that the depression that she goes through when she moves and moves away from the thing she loves and realizes that her best friend is starting to move away from her and that they've replaced her on her hockey team and whatnot. It's like it's very natural growth, and it's a frustrating change, but it's one that really is just so pivotal for children because that can happen to them, and it's just a natural part of life. And it also just shows things will happen in your memory, and that it's not going to stay the same. The things that you loved as a kid won't stay with you anymore. Like I think about the moment where they find the mine workers that suck the faded memories into the dump, and Joy is so passionate about keeping the names of Riley's old dolls, and yet the mine workers just completely suck all of them up and put them into the dump. Like obviously there's jokes about the fact that she took piano lessons, then they say keep heart and soul and chopsticks, and then there's also the president says, "I keep Washington, Lincoln, and the fat one."
It
Um, but
also makes sense
yeah,
that
like it
like
really is.
it also makes sense the sequence of events like how like Riley kind of loses all her personality islands because I think that shows that like like especially when you're getting older or you're around your tweens to teenage years, you start to give up or try to like move on from your past like interests. Like I don't need my family anymore. Or, who needs my friends anyway, or that kind of thing. And eventually you
Yeah,
do
you
come
become.
around because like when you're younger though and you're less mature or a full on adult, you make a lot of quick or harsh decisions for yourself that obviously would obviously come into fruition in this movie, like when Riley wants to run away and she even steals her mom's credit card, which is like pretty dark and pretty dark for like a Pixar and especially like a PG
Yeah,
movie.
it's pretty. Yeah, it's pretty dark that you see her attempt to run away, and she steals her mom's credit card to try to get on a bus to Minnesota, and like it's a really really like scary thought, and it showcases that children when they get older they can resort to doing some things that parents try to set them up not to do, and it's definitely natural because the older you get, you start to realize there's a lot more crookedness in the world, and that you're gonna have to do some things that you morally shouldn't have to do in order to, hopefully get the things you do, even if you realize it's like morally wrong. And seeing Riley actually steal the mom's credit card to try to buy a bus ticket for Minnesota is like something that's really brave, especially for a Pixar movie, because it just showcases, children are not perfect people. They're gonna do some things that are, not morally right.
Yeah, it
And
also shows like there is, even though this is overall a very bubbly and bright movie inside Riley's head, it also showcases how kind of dark and gloomy the real world can be, because you see how kind of disgusting
mm-hmm.
or gross like their new house is, and how
Yeah,
kind of cruel like the San Francisco kind of seems, it's all very
like how
dark and
cruel it is,
gray.
and yeah, like I love how it really, like I really love that progression as you see Riley getting a lot more depressed with how the colors start to fade around her. And one thing I noticed is that they, like in the outside world, they switch to like Steadicam and handheld camera shots as she becomes a lot more mentally unstable as she's starting to run away. And then there's that brilliant moment where after Sadness pulls the idea out of her head and the console lights up, it cuts back to Riley, and as she's realizing the horrible mistake she made, you can see the color just slowly come back into the
Oh
shot
yeah,
on her
it's a
face,
lot
and
it's a lot warmer, the image, the shot is.
yeah, it's a really warm image. Um,
I also think it's a
yeah,
very
just
effectively done like last sequence, too. It feels very natural since like I know some people like to, I know some people complain that Pixar movies get to have gotten too sentimental, but I think it's done well, especially in this movie, because like it's a movie about emotions,
yeah. I don't mind over sentimentality if it's done right, and this is one that is really done right. I mean, that ending where she just breaks down crying in front of her parents. It's one of the few moments in a film that actually got me to cry. I can count on one hand how many times I've cried watching a movie, and this is one of those few times where I can say, yeah, this got me to cry,
Yeah.
because it's
It's
so
also it
awful,
also just manages to be a very fun time. There's a lot of great sequences. Like I like when they go
Mm-hmm.
into trying
Oh,
to
the subconscious
subconscious
memories.
memories. Yeah.
Yeah, where the things that Riley fears the most, like broccoli and the staircase
Oh
in the
yeah, that
basement,
I like the Dream
Grandma's
Productions
vacuum.
part, but I also like the abstract
Oh yeah,
reality where like they turn into
yeah,
different
that's one of my
animation styles.
favorites. Yeah, or just the Imagination Land. They come across the imaginary boyfriend,
Yeah,
and and then Joy's so disgusted by it, and he's like, "Never seen." And Bing Bong goes, "Never seen him before.
yeah.
I live in Canada."
And I also like the part where like Bing Bong just passes by like that whole cloud town. He just kills the guy.
Yeah, and then Joy
He
does
just
the
blows
same
him away,
thing.
and like yeah, she does the same thing later too. I think they even make a Chinatown reference for like forget it,
Yeah,
it's
forget
Cloud
it, Jake.
Town.
It's Cloud Town. Yeah, this. Yeah, and yeah, that's really great. And then also, another. I mean, I've already mentioned this. One of the best jokes in the movie is the triple dent gum running gag. It's
Yeah,
just so funny. And also, I really like that little tribute they do to Joe Ranft with Jangles the Clown. That's actually a Joe Ranft
is
tribute. If
it?
you don't
Oh,
know.
that's interesting. I didn't know
Yeah,
that actually.
yeah, because I saw videos when they were honoring Joe Ranft, and he dressed up as a clown on Halloween parties, and it looked exactly like Jangles, and that was their tribute to him when they were making the movie. And I thought it was a very, very sweet tribute.
I thought all the parts with like the dream sequences really funny. I admittedly thought like the clown part could have been a little funnier, like when like the clown first comes out the first time. I think it could have had a bit of a funnier sort of reaction. I think from fear or something like that. But that's really grasping at straws.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I guess speaking of that, I also do appreciate how it didn't have like the third act like argument between like joy and sadness, because that could have easily happened. Because I
Yeah, like the best we got was that that little scene before Joy goes up the memory tube when
she just
all
says, "Well, I
the
can't. I need to go up. She needs me." It's like she's not really like arguing with her as much. She's just saying I can't.
Yeah, she's not arguing.
She just
I
kind of
need to
leaves
go
her
up. You can't
behind
go
though,
with me because the memories will get sad if you touch them. You know.
because that's been kind of a tired
And then also
trope in
there's not
recent
even.
movies, and I'm glad that it even avoided it for its time when that I think those were still kind of
Yeah,
happening.
yeah, yeah. That was something that I noticed that they were moving away from. Like even when they're at the lowest lows, when Joy is in the memory dump, even then there's no argument between her and Bing Bong. You know, and
I like Bing Bong. He's like not my favorite character in the movie, but like I think like I assume the decision was to add him because they probably needed a third like protagonist during most of the plot because I guess like Joy and Sadness together work well, but I think a third character to tag along with them makes a
yeah.
stronger group.
Yeah, I do know that. I mean, I've actually known that Joy and Sadness were not the initial duo. It
Yeah,
was
Joy
actually
and
supposed to
Fear
be Joy and
actually.
Fear. Yeah, and it wasn't working, and I remember the pitches weren't working, and I think Pete Docter really had an emotional breakdown towards it, and he was really freaking out because he was like, oh my god, I'm going to get fired and whatnot, I'm going to lose everything, and then he had to go on a reflection path, like, what are the things I love? And then he was like, oh my god, sadness. That's it. It's sadness. She should be the one going with joy, not fear, you know?
I remember like he
And
even came close to like abandoning the project altogether.
yeah, which is crazy to think that because I remember when he pitched it to Pixar. I actually didn't tell you this. Yeah, do you remember that in the late 2000s, early 2010s, Pixar was trying to make a movie called Newt.
Oh yeah,
Um, yeah, it was supposed to be directed by Gary Rydstrom, the sound designer who also did the short Lifted, and it wasn't working mainly because they couldn't figure out the third act because it's a movie about two newts who are the last of their kind and they
similar
have
to a
to
certain Blue Sky movie that came out around the same time.
it actually was not due to the blues. It actually was not due to Rio, believe it or not. It was mainly because they couldn't figure out the third act because the two had a mate, so they couldn't figure out how to make them do the deed in a GPG rated movie. So the movie wasn't working, and Gary Rydstrom eventually left the project. And they were about to give the movie to Pete because he had just come off of Up, and they thought maybe this will work. And Pete looked at the movie and was like, I'll do it, but I think I have an idea that's actually a lot better, and that was the Inside Out idea, and he pitched it to the studio, and the studio loved that more, and they went with that. And I always say I don't grumble at when an animated movie is canceled if the studio can come up with a better idea, and obviously this is a better
Yeah, I'd
idea.
rather have
Newt could have
this
been a good
than
movie.
Newt. Even if Newt turned out decent, I
Yeah,
still would have preferred they scrap that in favor of this.
Inside Out. Yeah, I agree. Like Newt could have been a good movie, but I don't think it would have been as good as Inside Out because Inside Out is like a genius idea.
Yeah. Oh
That's
yeah, that's
Newt is
it's
a
still
an
one of my
interesting idea,
favorite
but
ideas for a movie.
yeah, it's same here. It's just it was such an ingenious concept, and I really think they executed it to the best of their ability. I think it's just such an amazing movie, and I'm glad that its reputation has still held strong in the 9 years that it's come out because it really is such a crystal ball movie, like a
Like a
movie
core
that's
memory
so
movie.
shiny.
Core memories are shaped
It's a
after
core
crystal
memory.
balls.
Yeah, it is a core memory movie. Like I said, it's a crown jewel in Pixar's crown. Like Pixar has obviously a lot of crown jewel films in their catalog, and this is obviously one of their brightest ones. This is definitely one of their most important movies and one of their best
Yeah, I
movies.
agree.
And
It's also I think it's
yeah,
like one of the last times I think like they had a kind of really novel what if concept, like how they're known for like what do your toys do when you're not around, or what if like monsters had a whole company where their energy is fueled off of screaming children, or what if a rat wanted to cook, or what if robots fell in love. You got the idea. But I think this was like one of the
yeah,
last times they had a movie kind of structured around that. A what if your emotions were characters inside your head, and I think that's
yeah. I still think that I still think they did that with. I still think there were some what if movies that came after that, like Coco and Soul. But yeah, it is an interesting thing because I definitely have seen them move away from that because Luca and Turning Red and Elemental don't exactly fit into that kind of mold, honestly.
mhm,
Or maybe Elemental, but definitely not Turning Red and Luca.
yeah.
You know.
I remember one thing that really struck a chord with me is when I found out. this was like when I was much younger. This is apparently the nostalgia critic's favorite Pixar movie. So that's
Mm-hmm.
really interesting to know nowadays. I know it's like not. It's kind of notorious to say nowadays, but like because basically, as much as he's a kind of a controversial figure nowadays, he has become kind of a theme throughout my videos so far because a Doug Walker memes are funny. B because he did have genuinely have an influence on my love for film criticism and analysis when I was younger. He's actually the one who actually
Mm-hmm.
inspired me to create my channel all the way back when I was 14. But 7 years later,
Oh.
I guess the image of him has kind of changed. But I don't hate the guy. Even still, watching his Disney December review, he was talking about how much he loved the movie in general and how it pretty much does everything you can do with this idea and does it wonderfully. And he was even saying back then,
Yeah.
like how he was like one of the out of all the unnecessary sequels they're making right now. This is one I would love to see a sequel to. And then like 9 years later,
Here we are.
yeah,
Yeah. I don't think. I think when it comes to me with sequels, I usually don't grumble at it if I feel like the predecessor was good enough to justify it, and I feel like there's still ripe with material for it. Like, obviously, I am kind of burnt out by sequels nowadays because I think it's just because this decade we've had a lot more bad ones than good ones animation wise. But I've never been against a Pixar sequel, honestly. I mean, like I said before, the only Pixar sequel I outwardly dislike is Cars 2. I will still go to bat for pretty much all of them except for Cars 2. That's the only one. Like, I'll even mildly defend Cars 3, but um, Cars 2 is the only one I won't go to bat for. Like, obviously, most of them are inferior to their predecessors, but I don't think they're that bad. I think they get way too much hate. And besides, I'll say this, knowing that Disney had Circle 7 in the works in the mid 2000s, and we would have gotten some awful versions of Toy Story 3 and Finding Nemo 2.
and Monsters
It could
Inc.
have been
2,
worse.
Lost in Paradise.
Yeah, like it could have been worse because one, the animation would have looked worse. There's actually a demo online you can find. It doesn't look good. They probably wouldn't have gotten most of the voice actors back because they would have, allied themselves with Pixar, and understandably so. And three, this is the bigger thing. The stories were terrible.
Disney
Like
direct to video, probably storytelling.
yeah, yeah. Like if you don't know what it was, Toy Story 3 was going to be Buzz would have been shipped off to Taiwan because all of the Buzz Lightyear dolls would have been recalled, and toys had to get them back. And then and the script online, it would have had Woody speaking in like a very racist tone, like, oh, we don't speak Taiwanese, yeah, like that kind of thing. It's so bad. And then there's Finding Nemo 2, which, oh my god. Do you know the premise of Finding Nemo 2 for that Circle 7 thing?
What was it gonna be?
So it would have been that during the Barracuda attack, not only was Nemo the only surviving egg, there was going to be another clownfish egg that the Barracuda didn't eat, and it would have been Nemo's long lost twin brother who comes back into the picture. And guess what his name
Elmo?
was? And this is what blows my mind because Pixar was working on this movie at the same time, so they must have known. Disney must have known about this. Do you know what his name was?
Was it Remy?
Yes! And Marlin would have been kidnapped, and Dory, Nemo, and Remy would have had to go across the ocean to get Marlin. And it's like, jeez Louise. Like, it would, like, the idea of having Nemo get a long lost twin brother is so bad because it completely undermines the point of the first film. Because the fact that Marlin was going after Nemo was not because he loved him, it was also because of the fact that he was the only
child
family
he had
Marlin
left.
had left. Yeah, that was all he had left because Coral was dead and
All the other
unborn
children were
he had were
eaten.
dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it completely undermined the point of the first movie. Like every time I hear people talk about the Pixar sequels, I'm like, I don't want to hear anything against like Finding Dory or whatnot, because if you know what the original Finding Nemo 2 script would have been like that Disney was making, it could have been so much freaking worse.
It could have been a lot worse. Yeah. I mean, yeah. It could still
worse.
get even worse when they make the live action Pixar movies. They'll get.
Thank God that's actually not going to
Is
happen
it?
because Pete Docter said no.
Did-
No, Pete Docter said that'll never happen.
Oh, okay. I thought
Doctor
he meant
did.
more so that like Pixar is never gonna make them, but like they're more of an animation studio. So, is
Yeah,
Disney never
yeah.
gonna make them or?
I don't know. I think if even if Disney wanted to make them, I think Pixar is going to be like, absolutely not. We're not going to do that. And I'm glad they're doing that because everyone that knows me knows I hate the live action remakes. They're some of the most cynical movies coming out of Hollywood nowadays. They're so
They're
soulless.
so poorly made, so poorly shot, so poorly everything.
Yeah, just everything about them is awful, and they're just so
there's
cynical.
not really any of them I like, and even some of the ones like
No, none of them are good. I don't like any of them.
yeah, all of them
Even
suck.
the Jungle Book, I wasn't a huge fan of at the time. Even when that came out, I was like, why is everyone going nuts for this? This is not amazing. The animated version is much better.
Yeah, I mean, even still,
Yeah.
like, remember, like, the only, like, the last Disney remake I saw in a theater was, like, Beauty and the Beast, probably because, like, my mom said she really liked it, and then, like, some people at my school watched it, and I just didn't think too much at the time, but
Mm-hmm.
didn't really make much of an impact on me. Obviously, as I've grown to love the original Beauty and the Beast more over the years, I hate the remake even more, and I still have,
I totally feel you.
yeah,
I
I
totally
haven't
feel you because
seen,
Beauty and the Beast is my favorite.
yeah,
Beauty and the Beast is my favorite Disney remake movie, and the remake, I hated it when I first saw it. I was 17 when it came out, and I absolutely hated that movie. It's still, and that was the moment where I completely gave up on these remakes. They're just, ugh. I love that original movie so much. It's
yeah,
just
it was a
so
Best Picture
perfect.
nominee, a first for an animated movie.
Yeah, it was.
And I like
It
how they were
was, and
trying
it's
to
a
get. They
phenomenal
even had a
movie.
4 year consideration campaign for the remake, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
bro thinks he's on the team. Uh,
Bro
but
thinks he's on the team.
I remember like yeah, and that was the last real. That was like the last like proper remake of like a single animated movie because I technically saw Cruella because my mom really wanted to see it, but I didn't see Aladdin. I didn't see Lion King or uh, Little Mermaid
Yeah.
in theaters. So
I haven't seen any of them, and nor do I want
oh,
to.
you still never
I
seen any of
saw
them.
that. No, no. I after beating the Beast, I tapped out. Like I refused to see that live action Lion King remake,
It's technically not
and
really live action. It's much like it's just a
yeah,
fully
not even
animated
live
movie.
action. It's just a soulless animated movie where the characters look bored.
It's like a
uh,
documentary.
yeah, it's like a documentary. My ass.
Yeah. The only good
But
thing that it ever brought to us is just the YMS review, which is still
mm,
is not complete yet, but it's still very interesting and informative. But I
mm,
guess like some other things, I guess I wanted to address is like I um I guess it's worth addressing the what I would call the big pink elephant in the room towards
uh
Inside
huh.
Out. Not talking about Bing Bong itself, but like there's this like major criticism towards the movie where like people point out like the scene where like the workers are sending up like the bubblegum commercial up to headquarters and people are
Oh, why don't they do that with the
why
core
don't they do that with
memories?
the core memories?
I think I know. I think I can actually defend that against this plot hole, and I think the answer is that these memories are way too precious.
Yeah.
And I think if Joy set them up, I think she would have been worried that they'll get lost in the tube. Because again, like Riley was away, and obviously they know that something was wrong because they lost him. They lost an island by that point. So yeah, I feel like the idea that why couldn't she send them up to headquarters? Like I can easily combat that complaint because I'm like these are precious memories. I'm fairly certain Joy wouldn't want them unattended just going up because something could go horribly wrong and she wanted to make sure that they got to headquarters as safe as possible.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a plot hole. Probably more, if not even an oversight. I'd say it. We can probably assume that she didn't want to send them up to headquarters because she didn't want any of the other emotions to touch them or anything. Because like it establishes that anytime another emotion like touches one of the memories, like it changes to that emotion basically.
Yeah, like it's established that
She wants them to all
sadness
be stay
touches.
positive. So
Yeah, like and again, it's a keeping in the idea, of her toxic positivity that she has to learn with, the fact that Riley needs sadness. It's essential.
the pizza broccoli scene is another like major point of criticism with the movie because like
Mm-hmm.
I've seen like people have seen that movie and they're like especially at that part where she gets broccoli pizza and why people are like why does she want broccoli pizza if she thinks it's gross and like have you not do you not understand the context of the scene though. She's just ordering a slice of pizza. She doesn't know that there's
Yeah,
Mr.
it's just
Broccoli pizza
yeah.
there.
I mean, it's just like I said, it's a
You know?
joke, and also they say clearly like it's like a pizza by the slice kind of thing, and they change it daily. It's called Yeast of Eden, so it's obviously like a bakery that's not known for having pizza. Like you can see like other types of breads behind them at the store, so it's really kind of a nitpicky complaint, you know.
Yeah. I remember like this was like definitely like a movie that especially like helped me. I know it definitely helped you.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that
Yes.
especially, but I think I was kind of going through a similar thing that Riley was going to. Like I would have been 12 when this movie came out, and before that I actually had transitioned middle school schools when I was going to 6th grade, and so I kind of like was moving friend groups and that kind of thing, and that kind of spoke to me like how she was like struggling to adjust to a new location and that kind of
Oh
thing.
yeah, yeah,
And so I definitely related to that a lot. And so it came out just like not long after I just like moved to middle school. So
yeah.
that's
Yeah, it came out at the perfect time for me. Like I said, like it came out right I was about to start high school, so it was definitely the needed comfort I needed. And much like the sequel, which we'll get to in a bit, but yeah, that's a whole other beast entirely. But yeah, it really was just like a movie that couldn't have come out at any other time other than 2015, because that was just the perfect time it could have come out to comfort me when I was in that depressive state.
yeah. I'm really sorry you had to go through that, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a lot
But yeah,
better now than I
we
was
all
a
go
decade
through
ago,
that.
so I'll say that.
Yeah, that's good. I yeah, I mean, I remember like when this was like my favorite animated movie when I was like in high school, especially, or like during my like teens, because like I fell in love with this concept and the characters and the story and everything, to like the point where like I said it was like one of my favorite movies like in high school. This was before my taste evolved in film over time too, which was like where I discovered new films that I really loved,
Yeah.
and like I found out like that even like my classmates like kind of said Inside Out sucks or whatever, and like that like it got to me at first, but especially now knowing how like successful the sequel was and how much people went to see opening weekend. Look who's laughing now.
Yeah. I mean, I know
Yeah.
the same feeling. I went through film school where I had to go through all that, especially with like classic films and directors. Like, I couldn't like animation, I couldn't like Spielberg and whatnot. It was like a really frustrating mindset to be in where you had to like shove your likes back in it. And now I'm like fully expressive. Like, I don't give a fuck what any of you think. This is the films I like. Like, yeah, obviously my tastes have also evolved too. I've discovered more filmmakers from the likes of David Fincher and Bob Fosse and whatnot, and seeing how other movies influence other movies and whatnot, and the darker roots they go into. But yeah, Inside Out really still remains one of my all-time favorites for me, and it's still, as an animated film, it really operates on a level that some animated movies are unafraid to operate at. And even then, one thing I didn't talk about is that a lot of animated films have tried to rip off this film's style so many times, and
Oh,
they
true.
failed to really catch
Emoji Movie
like
2017.
Emoji Movie's another, like Emoji Movie's a big one. That's a big one.
I say that's probably admittedly more similar to Lego Movie and Wreck-It Ralph
Yeah,
specifically, and also arguably
yeah,
Shrek. I haven't seen many people compare it to Shrek, but I'd probably put it in that caliber as
yeah. Shrek
well.
I could kind of see, but yeah, Lego Movie and Wreck-It Ralph are the big ones for Emoji Movie. But there is definitely Inside Out in that movie. Though I think another big animated film that really ripped off Inside Out was, of course, Luck. Oh my god.
Oh yeah, that was like that felt like a poor man's Inside
It
Out, because like that was produced by
it
John
really
Lasseter,
was.
and like
It's
that
terrible. I mean,
yeah,
and
it looks like a movie that aired on Nick Jr. in
yeah, the
2013.
animation
So
is.
like that would
Can you believe that movie
yeah,
cost $150 million? How did that movie
$140 million.
cost about as
It's
much
like
as Soul? That is bewildering to me. And
it also cost more than like Into the Spider Verse, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish,
yeah,
all these other superior animated movies that have made 100 times the amount of cultural impact that it did.
yeah, and it's crazy. And I just remember when I first saw that movie, I was shocked by how bad it was. And I think the other thing that really just showcases why Inside Out is a better movie is the world building that it showcases, because Inside Out's world is so detailed and
Imaginative and fun
imaginative, but it's
and
so
cool.
it functions properly. No, you can follow it from piece to piece. Like if you try to explain it to A novice, they totally understand it. Like the headquarters or the dream productions or the subconscious basement or the abstract thoughts. Like, how do they work? How do they operate with ourselves? You can explain it and it functions correctly. Every piece in the world building functions correctly. Where you look at a movie like Luck and there is so many pieces to it, like, oh, there's these lucky pennies and there's these weird Celtic things where they return it, and also there's these departments that operate other pieces of luck, and then wait, there's another world where it does the bad luck kind of thing, and no, there's these clovers that
It doesn't make
operate
any
things, and like
sense.
I can't like you like, and I'm like, what is the overall goal of this world? How does it work? How does it get from point A to point B? You can't explain it. It is so messy. It is so dysfunctional. It is some of the worst world building I've ever seen. Like, it is terrible, especially when you compare it to Inside Out.
I
You know?
Yeah, I haven't like I watched that movie like almost 2 years ago. I honestly forgotten most of it, but like I can remember how bad the world building was at the time. I think I even mentioned that in my Letterboxd review. But yeah, Luck was like awful,
Yeah.
and that
It
like
just
I mean I'm also like I one thing I guess like I forgot to mention about like Inside Out in particular is that like I remember speaking of world building of it. Remember like Jello Apocalypse like in a segment like yeah, I think one of his criticisms was like, "Whoa, why don't they have an elevator or something like that?" It's like, just like, well, I don't know where you're getting like these ideas. Like, why would it have an elevator? Because the emotions are not supposed to leave their headquarters
yeah,
there.
exactly. Exactly.
It's like, by the way, this is the same guy who said, "I hope that that everyone realizes how mediocre Ratatouille is." So yeah, fuck that guy.
Yeah, Ratatouille is a
Um,
phenomenal movie, and I'm not going to hear any word against it.
yeah,
But yeah, like yeah, when you compare like Inside Out really is a showcase on how to do world building, not just in an animated movie, but in a movie in general. Especially when you compare it to a film like Luck, because Luck is so complicated and convoluted, and you cannot explain that world for the life of me. It is a terribly constructed world, and it's also, like I said, it's a poor man's Inside Out. Uh, but yeah, Inside Out. Yeah, what can I say? I love that movie.
great
Great
movie.
movie.
Also, it was the last most recent Pixar movie I believe that was nominated for best original screenplay at the
Yeah,
Oscars.
it was.
It didn't get a best picture nomination, but a best original screenplay nomination for a Pixar
Yeah.
movie after Toy Story 3. That's worth
Yeah, it's worth
something.
something.
Yeah.
Also, I'll just say it. I think it should have gotten more Oscar noms. I think it should have gotten best score and best sound design. Honestly.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say there's other animated movies since then that have been done dirtier. Like the Spider-Verse movies got like one nomination and that's it. You know,
Mhm.
even Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, which like that's from del Toro, Guillermo del Toro, who won the Oscar for Shape of Water just a few years
I don't
before, and
understand how
you're
Alejandro
not even
Desplat's
getting.
score didn't even get nominated for that movie, and yet that All
Yeah,
Quiet on the Western Front not only got nominated, it won because it's basically like a diet Hans Zimmer score.
yeah. It's like I only remember like one like single like beat in that movie. It's duh duh duh. And every time, I remember like watching the Oscar ceremony that year, and every time like that movie won an Oscar, they would play the score of it, and it sounded like duh duh duh. Like it's almost like a bad thing that it won.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but you know, again, like my high school classmates like didn't care for this movie. They teased me a lot, but you know, again, sucks to be them since like people like
Yeah,
it.
sucks to be
And
them.
also, my high school teacher, like when I found out he really didn't like this movie, he's also not really a fan of most animated movies in general. He's like one of those adults, so like
Killjoy.
animation's just for kids. Yeah, he's like he even like I don't think he's ever watched a single Ghibli movie or an animated movie that's rated PG-13 or above. So like that kind of explains it. But I also found out recently that he thought The Flash was better than Across the Spider-Verse. And I'm like, oh my
Seriously?
god.
Jeez. I
Yeah.
have not seen that movie. I refuse to do so. That is one of those movies that's firmly on my blacklist, but I
I'm not saying you can't have your opinions because I'm very respectful towards other people's
yeah, but
opinions, but
I've seen that ending, and
like
it is
that goes way too
and that
far.
ending is insulting. It is so insulting. Like, especially to the like people like Christopher Reeve and George Reeves, especially.
Oh yeah, especially George Reeve because I think that he passed away the same day the movie came out, except like
And it's
decades
even
earlier.
worse
And that's
because
like,
he didn't
yeah,
want to be associated with Superman. He was worried he was going to get
yeah.
typecast. It's just so icky. But
It's so funny though, like they were hyping it as like like all these celebrities were like, "This is the next big thing. It's a masterpiece." The movie comes out, nobody cares.
I'll just say this: I am very glad Elemental beat it at the box office. I'm very very
Oh
glad.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I'm not even a big fan of Elemental, but like I would rather that movie be a hit than like The Flash because like oh my gosh,
yeah.
I don't want Ezra Miller in any more movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Neither do I. And this is coming from someone that loves Perks of Being a Wallflower.
Yeah, I've heard that movie's
Oh,
good. I
it's
haven't seen
amazing.
it,
That's one of
but
my favorite movies. I highly recommend it.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think like one thing that has stuck to me in particular was like there was this like video that Emp Lemon published through like his secondary channel, Downward Diary. And don't get me wrong, Emp Lemon's a guy I want to make clear I have absolute nothing but respect for as like a creator, and especially as like a guy who makes really good videos and seems like a very honest to God, very cool guy. But I have to say like I disagree with like his like take on Inside Out as a movie for moms and children
Mm-hmm.
because I think it sounds kind of condescending to say because like there's absolutely darker subtext to it
Yeah.
beyond just like the colorful stuff to it. And I think like to have that perception of like everything after Toy Story 3 is a movie made for moms and children. Because like even like besides Inside Out, there's like Coco and
Yeah.
Soul. Those have very mature themes
Yeah.
in
I
them,
think. Yeah. It's
especially.
kind of insulting. Like, I feel like the over analysis Pixar has gotten since Toy Story 3 is a little bit frustrating because I'm not expecting them to be completely flawless. I'm not expecting them to constantly pump out masterpiece after masterpiece like they did in the 2000s. Like, the only thing I expect to see out of them are good movies. Are they still making good movies? Yeah. Are they making movies that are definitely weaker than others? Obviously. Like, there's movies that are not
Absolutely.
I'm not as in love with as other Pixar movies, but that doesn't mean I think they're bad per se. And, uh, like, and I feel like people just really are overly critical about them because, like I said, when you make as many masterpieces as you do, you're going to be examined a lot more closely for your weaknesses and flaws, your Achilles heels almost. And I'm not looking for that from Pixar. The only thing I want to see out of them is good movies and also just just common stuff I want to see, employees being treated fairly and whatnot and that. And,
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot more female voices take control of the company. There's a lot more newer voices coming in. And I still think they're making good movies, so I'm not complaining about that. And I do think they're in a much better shape compared to other animation studios right
Then they were
now.
in the
Yeah, they're
2010s.
better than 2010s. And I also think they're better than other studios right now. They're certainly in a much better place than, say, Paramount or even Skydance right now. Skydance is a
DreamWorks, I
disaster.
think.
Yeah,
DreamWorks, I feel bad for them because like they're no longer producing in house
yeah.
anymore, and like
I think DreamWorks will
getting
get it back. I
layoffs
think
too.
DreamWorks will make a comeback. I think that whole in-house thing is gonna implode in their face very soon. I really think that that's gonna be
Yeah,
a face plant on them. But yeah, I really think Pixar. I think honestly, I'm a lot more excited and optimistic for Pixar's future than most people are because I know a lot of people were panicking about that Bloomberg article, which I'm not going to get into because it is a headache and a half to talk about. But um,
I mean, I hated how I guess like you said it's very unlikely Pete Docter was the one who said
yeah,
that, even though
it's
it was
very
quoting
much a
him.
hit piece. It was a hit piece, and I feel like a lot of Disney execs were pushing him to suggest that because I still think that we're going to see a lot more personal stuff out of Pixar one way or the other. We're getting original movies out of them, and even the animated movies they were making in the 2000s were personal, and obviously there's still going to be more personality to them. I don't think we're going to be seeing films that are going to lose that personal touch like some people are panicking about. And they're aware that they do not want to make too many sequels. Like, I do not think Pixar is going to become a sequel factory like some people state. And also, I'll just say this: I don't think Pixar is that bad at making animated sequels. They're certainly much better than other animation studios out there. Some animation studios just cannot make a sequel to save their lives, and that's not saying a bad thing. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Some studios can make original movies and they're fine, but they just shouldn't make sequels. But
I think DreamWorks, in my opinion, I think is like the studio has the best track record when it
yeah,
comes
I
to
think
sequels, in my
DreamWorks is
opinion.
definitely one of the best ones when it comes to sequels. I also would throw Pixar in
Like
there.
Shrek 2, Kung Fu Panda 2,
Yeah,
Puss in Boots 2,
How
How
to
to
Train
Train
Your
Your Dragon
Dragon
2,
2. Yeah,
Hell, as it is a meme to say, the Madagascar sequels are a natural continuation of the original
Yeah,
movie.
I really like. I like the Madagascar trilogy. I think they're good movies, and I like that they are natural progressions of a character arcs. Like I think when it comes to a lighter comedy series, that's a good template to look at because you start from characters at the Central Park Zoo who are very, downbeat, and then they get to Madagascar and they think it's the worst decision they ever make. And then at the end of the third movie, when they get back to the zoo, they're all completely different characters. And Alex looks at Marty and says, leaving the zoo was the best thing that ever happened to us. And that's great character development. It's really good writing. I think that's
Yeah,
natural,
they didn't even need to do that because like Madagascar is just wacky circus animals that end up on a island, but they still put in the effort, I think, though, and like stuff like that.
Yeah, they really did. But yeah, but getting back to Pixar and their sequels, like I do not think Pixar's going to become a sequel factory. I don't think they're going to be leaving this personal thing behind them. I do not think they're in as bad a shape as some people are making it out to be. I do not think they're in any danger of being closed. Like I said, they're definitely in a better place than Paramount or Skydance. I mean, the latter is. I don't think they're going to even make it this decade. I think they're going to be done before 2030. But yeah,
Skydance Animation is going to become the franchise pictures of animation studios. In case you don't know,
I know what
is like the studio.
Oh, I know what franchise pictures is. I mean, Battlefield.
They weren't even a real film studio. They were just like a financing company. They made Battlefield Earth, Ballistic, X vs. Sever, and Sound of Thunder, and what was it called? Fear.com, I think it was. Just all these like
Fear.com, yeah.
low budget.
They were very
they were low budget blockbusters, I guess you would say, or schlockbusters, I'd put it.
Did you know Battlefield Earth was the movie that got them investigated by the FBI?
Yeah, that's really funny.
That was the one. But yeah, like I said, I think I'm not worried about Pixar's future, mainly because I think they've been making good movies, and like I said, Inside Out 2, which we'll get to, is a really good sequel, and it's making good money, and I do not think they're going to learn the wrong lessons from it, because they didn't learn the wrong lessons from Turning Red. The Turning Red's message was that we want to see more female creatives at Pixar, and obviously that's happened. There's a lot more female voices in the upper positions, and are now directing their movies alongside Domi Shi, so yeah, I really do think that when it comes to Pixar's future, I'm a lot more optimistic than most people are. I think we're going to be in good hands, and they're going to be still making more original movies. Like, that's not going away. We got Elio coming out next year. There's an original coming out in 2026. I'm pretty certain there's going to be more originals later on in the decade. So I'm not worried about their future at all. Like, I don't think they're going to go make back-to-back sequels like they did in the 2010s. I don't think that's ever going to happen.
I mean, I definitely hope that they do continue to make more originals, because, like, in this current industry, like, they're one of the only things that they're one of the only studios allowed to make original movies that are marketed as Hollywood tentpoles.
Yeah.
The only other examples would be like Christopher Nolan and I guess to some extent A24, but that's like very niche.
Yeah.
So
I think, but yeah, they're gonna still keep making original animated movies, and I know they have good directors there. Like there's a lot of Spark Short directors rising up in the ranks, like Kristen Lester, who did Pearl, and Madeline Sherifian, who did Burrow, and Rosanna Sullivan, who did Kitbull. And also, there's also other people like Daniel Chong, the creator of We Bare Bears, is working there now. He's probably working on a new movie there. So
I think I did hear that he was a storyboard artist on some of their movies.
He was a storyboard artist on the first Inside Out. Yeah, he returned to Pixar right after We Bare Bears, and he's apparently maybe directing a movie there. I don't know. We'll see.
Ooh, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, but I'm actually confident about Pixar's future. I think we're gonna see some good stuff from them. So
yeah.
But yeah,
I will still like definitely keep my mind open, give them a shot. I think what would you say is like you'd say what are your top 5 Pixar? I think you said to me that Inside Out is your third favorite, and Up is your first favorite,
yes.
And second favorite is Soul, right?
Right. If I had to pick my top 5, I know WALL-E is my fourth favorite. If I had to pick my fifth, I think it's Monsters, Inc. I'm not fully sure, but I think it's Monsters, Inc. So yeah, let's just go with Monsters, Inc.
Pete Docters are like top or 4 of your top 5. That's really cool.
He's one of my favorite directors. What can I say?
Yeah. he's a great director. Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Uh,
he's my
I
personal favorite director at Pixar mainly, and also from what I've seen, he's actually like a genuine good human being. He's very smart. He has excellent taste in movies. Just he's the one director at Pixar who I still have massive respect for because I still love Brad Bird, but I did lose a little bit of respect from him when he jumped ship make to work with Lasseter,
uh,
which is
to work with Misconduct Entertainment.
yeah, which was apparently was a shot in the foot because Ray Gunn apparently is not going over well at that studio from what I'm hearing. It is
I'm
sinking
shocked.
terribly.
Shocked. Well, not that shocked.
Yeah, basically that. Every time I hear bad news out of that studio, I'm like, why do I have a complete lack of surprise? But yeah, Inside Out, yeah, masterpiece. I love it. I love it so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my most personal movies. I actually still own it on Blu-ray. I opened it for the first time this year when I was in college because some of my friends on Letterboxd and Discord actually like rewatched it, and then I was like, you know what, that's a good idea. I should watch that because I haven't opened up the Blu-ray yet, and after years of rewatching it for the first time, I still understand why I fell in love with it.
Same here. Same here.
I think it's my favorite P Doctor movie. Actually, I'm gonna go out on a limb here.
That's a good one to have. That was my second favorite Pete Docter movie for a long time. But yeah, that's a great. Like I've seen many people say that this is their favorite Pete Docter movie, and I do not blame them at all. It's a great choice, honestly. Great choice.
All of his movies are good. I'd say he's like the most consistent Pixar director. Absolutely have to give him credit for.
I agree. I mean, he's the one director who has not directed sequels at the studio, and he said he
Yeah,
doesn't want
it's
to
true.
direct sequels, which I got.
I applaud him because he could easily just make a sequel because like it'll make $1 billion, sure, but like he still like wants to make new stuff. Though.
Yeah,
He doesn't
like
want to
he stated
retread
for the
himself.
record that he doesn't feel like revisiting characters and old worlds because he's already familiar with them and he feels like he's said what he needs to say about these characters and he just wants to move on to the new thing. And as a filmmaker, I gotta respect that. I think that's a really interesting mindset to have as a director. Like once you're done with something, you really want to move on. You don't want to revisit it because you're like, yeah, I said what I said. I don't need to repeat it. So
I wonder if he takes that kind of influence from Miyazaki as well, because Miyazaki makes a lot of personal stories that.
oh yeah,
And none of them are sequels.
Absolutely. He
Yeah.
said that Miyazaki is a huge influence for him, which makes a lot of sense because he said that Totoro is probably his favorite, which absolutely makes a lot of sense, honestly.
Oh yeah, I'd also say he definitely has. Besides Brad Bird, he definitely has the most distinct style. Where like I know that's a Pete Docter movie because of like the character designs or like the tone of the movie and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Like, you can really see that even when you go back to the student film. Like, I looked at his student film he made before he joined Pixar. It was called Next Door. And you still have that influence. Like, one thing, you mentioned character designs. If you look at that student film, there's a square character and there's a circle character. And that's something I've noticed in all of his movies. He has a square character and a round character that he deals with. Like, Mike and Sully, Carl and Russell, Joy and Sadness, and Joe and 22, And that's something he's also used, like a characters at odds with each other going on this journey, because that was something he took inspiration from Paper Moon, the Peter Bogdanovich movie. Great movie, by the way.
I did read that was one of his favorite movies, so
Yeah.
that's really interesting. I still haven't seen it, but
It's great.
didn't it have what was the actors? Was it Ryan O'Neal in that?
Yeah, it's Ryan and Tatum O'Neal.
Oh, yeah.
And they're both
Yeah.
excellent in that movie. They're both really, really good. Yeah,
I mostly know Ryan O'Neal because he was in one of my favorite. He was in one of my favorite movies, Barry Lyndon.
Oh,
So,
Barry Lyndon is
one of my favorite
masterpiece.
Kubricks.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
top tier Kubrick. Love Barry Lyndon.
Oh yeah.
So good.
I'd put that as my second favorite Kubrick. So
Yeah, that's a good.
um,
Yeah, I've seen some people say that's their second Kubrick. I can totally understand that. It's definitely a top 5 for me. Maybe top 3.
yeah. So I put this like definitely in my top 5. Inside Out. Other ones would be like Incredibles, Finding Nemo, Wall-E, Ratatouille. Close to there is like Up, Toy Story 3, Toy Story 2, Monsters Inc. Too many good ones to name. So.
Yes, too many
But-
good ones. Yeah. But yeah.
And even some ones that I don't put it as like masterpieces, but I still really like Luca and Turning Red. So.
Yeah, Luca Turning Red Soul. I love all 3 of those movies. I'm really glad I got to see him in theaters this year. That was so cool because I
I did too. I I didn't get to see Luca in theaters, but I got to see Soul and Turning Red. Yeah.
Yeah. Really interesting revisiting him on the big screen because I caught a lot of details I didn't notice when revisiting them. That was fascinating. Like one detail I didn't notice when I rewatched Turning Red was right after May's mother dropped her off at the school when she's still trying to conceal the panda. You see when May looks back at Ming, you can see Ming clutching the red panda necklace around her neck, and I was like, oh my god, that is such a great detail. I did not notice that. Like, you could tell that she's still trying to conceal this panda, and yet she doesn't even know the fact that her daughter already has the gift.
Yeah. All right, so I guess this would be a good segue into the sequel.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Inside Out 2. You said, so do you want me to go first in terms of like my expectations, my thoughts on it, or do you want to go first?
Yeah, you can go first.
All right. So basically, I was like, this is a sequel I wanted to see for many years. Like, when I was like 12, like I was around 13 when Pete Docter hinted at a sequel. Like he said, we'll see what happens, you know? And so, like, I was like very excited for a potential one. But then as I've grown up and I've had my, thoughts on Pixar sequels, like, I don't hate all of them. Like, my thoughts vary from I really like it to it's alright. So like I really don't like it. So like I definitely have it's a very mixed bag of like good and bad or lukewarm to me in terms of like Pixar continuations, sequels, prequels, spin-offs if you want to count Lightyear. So I was definitely skeptical because of that, and especially skeptical when I found out that P Doctor was not going to be returning. Which like I kind of got the impression like after because I think he said like Soul was going to be his last movie before he was going to be the full on CEO of the company.
Yeah, that
so,
was
of course
the last
he doesn't
movie.
He doesn't have all the time.
Yeah, like he said that Soul was going to be his last film before fully taking over as CCO. He's still considering whether or not he makes a fifth film. We'll see if he does. I really, really hope he does. But yeah, I totally understand.
It could still happen.
Wanting to step away because when he was making Soul, all the shit went down with with
pandemic
and the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
And but yeah, when it comes to Inside Out 2, I kind of was in a similar boat you were. I remember at D23 when Amy Poehler came out on stage and announced it, the first word out of my mouth when I heard about it was, huh. And it was not because of the Pixar sequels like you suggested, because I actually will defend all the Pixar sequels except Cars 2, but I was
the one everyone agrees is bad, but yeah,
that's the only one. I think everyone can agree Cars 2 is the bad one, but yeah, when it comes to
because it was made by the bad guy,
the bad guy, and it's just a bad movie in general. But anyway, when it came to Inside Out 2 getting announced, the reason I said that is not because I don't like Pixar sequels. It was mainly because that first film was so good, and I was wondering how the hell are they going to follow it up on it? And then once the teaser came out, that's when I was like, okay, I'm actually starting to warm up to this. This could be exciting. And then I think as more and more time goes on and more stuff was revealed about it, I was like, okay, I'm sold. This is going to be good. This is going to be real good. And
I was definitely intrigued as soon as like the teaser dropped. Like that was like, okay, I'm still skeptical, but I'm interested though. Like it's an interesting hook. I like it kind of like had that whole scene of like them like the emotions are being woken up because like there's a new emotions arriving and one of them is anxiety. It was like, wow, this is interesting. It's like I kind of suffer from some anxiety myself, so same. I think everyone does.
I'll get into my anxiety struggles in a bit on why I think this movie really resonates with me, especially when it comes to the third act, which we'll get to. But yeah, as soon as I saw the anxiety character with her excellent design and also just Maya Hawke's performance, I knew for a fact that this was going to be on the right track. I knew, okay, they know what they're doing. Because, yeah, like you said, Pete Docter does not direct the sequel. This is being directed by Kelsey Mann, who is a former storyboard artist on Cartoon Network, who did some work on Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, which makes sense, because Anxiety does look like a very Foster's-esque character. And then he moved to Pixar. He was a story supervisor on Monsters University and Onward. And he also did the MU short Party Central, which is really fun. I like that one a lot. Um,
Yeah.
and I was intrigued to see what they would do. I was hoping, hoping that this would be a worthy continuation because, like I said, the original movie that Pete Docter established was such an ingenious world. Like, that was a film that was so ripe to be continued. And it was the only Pixar film that hadn't gotten a sequel by that point that made sense, because Bug's Life could have gotten a sequel, maybe in the 2000s, but definitely not now, because most of the cast is sadly passed, and also it's nowadays seen as one of their lesser films. Ratatouille, Wall-E, and Up are all great. I don't think I could
They
see
don't
them.
need sequels though.
Yeah, they don't need sequels. They told the stories they want to tell. And Brave and Good
Like,
Dinosaur are
yeah.
not among their best, and I don't think...
Good Dinosaur flopped, so they would never make a sequel to that.
Yeah, yeah. And Brave is not seen as one of their highlights either nowadays. So, Inside Out was the only one. And Coco's a great movie, but again, much like Ratatouille, Walling Up, it doesn't need a sequel. So...
No, it doesn't.
But Inside Out, that was a film that was like, yes, this could absolutely use a sequel. Like, Riley getting older. Like, what happens when you get...
And getting new emotions.
And a new emotions.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. What happens when that darn puberty alarm goes off, Which...
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I wanted to see, like, a sequel since I was younger, because I really wanted to see Riley grow up and that kind of thing. Like, kind of like the Toy Story movies had with Andy, they kind of showed him grow up and stuff like that. And I think that potentially with this movie, with, like, Riley being a teenager, it's kind of like like the first movie started off with her as, like, basically from when she was first born. So
yeah,
it could kind of, like, show throughout. They could have a whole trilogy of, like, this is basically her, it's kind of like the movie Boyhood, except it's girlhood or something like that. So,
yeah, that's a good way to look
it's a
at
trilogy.
it. Yeah.
Like a trilogy of, like, growing up. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good way to look at it. But, yeah, when it comes to this, I was very intrigued to see what they would do with it, especially with Riley growing up and the new emotions and the wackiness that they experience. And, yeah, I went into it on Thursday, hoping it would be good, and... yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed this movie. I think this is a great sequel. I really think this is a great sequel.
As someone who definitely has my problems with most Pixar sequels, I have to say it's good. I really liked it.
Yeah. Yeah. It really feels good.
I have some issues with it personally, but I still think it's a sequel I absolutely did not mind existing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and yeah.
Yeah.
What was your I liked I was like, one of my big worries going into it was going to be kind of a rehash of the first movie, because, like,
yeah,
the trailers were kind of showing, like, a lot of this, they're like the emotions, like, they're kicked out of the headquarters again, they have to find their way back, or that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the way that they still create new scenarios with the when they're outside of there, yeah. I think they still make it fairly fresh, to the point where, like, I was still definitely engaged with what was happening. And also some very funny sequences and new characters as well.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I was worried about if they were gonna rehash the first movie as well, because I don't like it when sequels are just carbon copies of the first movie, where it's like, it's the same thing again, except it's slightly different, And I have seen animated sequels that are like that, even this decade. Like Sing 2, for instance, was a big example of that. That was a sequel that was basically just a complete retread of the first film, except it was bigger, louder, and had more glitter. Like, it didn't really develop these characters at all. They basically kind of went through the same actions that they did in the first movie. Like, the gorilla Johnny learning how to dance and pleasing a snooty choreographer is not any different from him learning to play the piano and dealing with a strict father. Like, that's not character development. It's just rehashing. It's just rehashing the first movie and just slightly passing it off as it. Like, see, this is continuation. Like, no, it's not. It's just a repeat, Whereas this movie actually does flesh out the characters, like, especially the emotions. You really get to see them with a lot more depth and a lot more knowledge that they had in the first film, especially with Joy. Her learning from what it was like repressing other emotions, exactly, and learning to keep sadness away, and Yeah, and also with the other three emotions that Joy now has to go with, because she was with sadness throughout the movie, and now in this movie she's with anger, fear, and disgust. And there's that great scene in the movie where, you know, they're trying to get on the construction equipment and it's not working, and the three are just bickering and complaining, and then Joy just absolutely snaps at them, like, delusional. Of course I'm delusional, and
Joy's
she's
delusional.
just so fed up and snaps at them, and then
Of
all of
course
a
I'm
sudden she just
delusional.
finally, like, it really just shows she's finally lost her limit with these bickering, and then she finally admits, I don't know everything. I'm not human and perfect, and she's upset. And it's like, I don't know if what anxiety is doing is right. And then the one character that really is the one that comforts her is Anger, because Anger was the one that did a lot of the damage in the first movie to Riley, with the islands crumbling and her running away and whatnot. And to see him be the one to comfort her and be like, we all make mistakes, we're not human, but we know we believe you and we're going to be right behind you. I was like, yes, this is character development. This is good writing. I want to see this. This is what I want to see in movies, you know? In sequels, essentially.
Yeah. I also like how Joy doesn't like degress as a character. Like most sequels,
Mm-hmm.
I even have problems like the same problem with like some Pixar sequels where like the main character goes through the same arc that they went through the last movie, but like she doesn't go through that here. Like the opening scene is like she
Yeah,
is
yeah.
basically letting all the other emotions go hog wild on the hockey field, and I love that because like she's still like she even says, you know, I've learned my mistake. Like I'll let the other
Mm-hmm.
emotions like
Yeah,
basically like
exactly.
have a share of
And
Riley too. So and the other I like how the other emotions are utilized too. I actually like Sadness's role in this movie too, and how like she's kind of good friends with Joy, even in like that scene when like they're going down to the
sense of self,
uh,
yeah.
sense of self. Yeah,
Yeah, and that was a really nice scene, like, because she was the only one that hadn't been there before, and it was such a nice moment because it really showed that, you know, now she's very trustworthy of Sadness. She's allowing her, you know, to experience the things that she would have kept her away from in the first film, you know, and
yeah.
yeah, and also just the set for the sense of self was so beautifully designed. I cannot stress this enough. This is a very visually stunning movie. They did a lot of great stuff with the sets and the character designs here. It is a gorgeous film.
And even some they even added some new styles. Like they added that video game character.
Oh,
You know
Land
that was like
Slash
Riley's
Blade.
crush,
Yeah,
Land
Riley's
Slash.
and he's and his lip movements are in Japanese, and it doesn't match the English dialogue, and he's so pixelated. And even when he puts his hand on his head and he's trying to clutch his hair, the fingers clip through the head, so it looks like his hand is just going into his head. It's so good. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Um.
Now, at that moment, I was thinking maybe they need to get Gwimbly in this movie, like from that Smiling Friends episode.
Ew, ew, ew.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah, but I liked the part with Bluefy and how
oh
like
my
basically you're just
god,
kind of talking to the
Luffy.
audience, and like that was really funny, and like I remember I think there was like this part there's this one line where Anger is just like someone kill me, and that actually got me to laugh really hard,
Oh my god, the
especially.
whole Bluefy scene was one of the biggest slaps of the film, especially with the way they poked apart like preschool shows. Like, I think two shows I really show them poking apart in this were Dora and Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, because the oh pouchy
I
thing.
was thinking of Blue's Clues too, because Bluefy is basically like I
Yeah,
don't know, it
Blue's
sounds
Clues.
similar to Blue's Clues, but you know
Yeah,
they have also have talking inanimate objects too, so
talking inanimate
that's why.
objects. Yeah, and also just it's just the fourth wall breaking that always gets me. Is like Anger is like, who are you talking to? And then it just cuts back to the emotions perspective, and you just see Bluefy talking to a wall. It's
That was great.
it's so good. And also, there's other good gags and even good callbacks. Like, they brought back the triple dent gum thing.
Yeah,
That
I
was so
remember that they
funny.
brought that back
That was
briefly.
one of the biggest laughs in the film, when Anxiety's looking for new songs, and then all of a sudden, triple that gum, and then it's everyone, and the audience just lost it. And it was like, Oh my god, it was so funny. Like my audience for this movie was howling at this film. They were going hysterical. I haven't been in a crowd that has been this crazy for the jokes in years, and ones that were
Man,
actually funny. You know.
it was a really crowded theater where I went to. Actually, I went to see this at like a Dolby Digital. It was the same theater I actually saw the first movie in, except it's now an AMC cinema. So I guess it was
Mm.
like bought out by the giant chain, but it's still basically the same theater, same location. But
Yeah, I saw
yeah,
this in IMAX, and yeah, and I remember the next day when I was going back to the mall area, one of my friend shows me his phone and pulls up the seats, and the theater was just crowded. I was like, and as soon as I saw that seat, I was like, this movie's gonna be huge. Like this is gonna be
yeah,
big.
and it was big. But I guess we'll get to that a little later after we talk
Hmm.
about the movie. But
Yeah,
um, yeah. What were your thoughts on like the voice replacements? Because like I was definitely skeptical going into it
I was too.
because like
Yeah.
yeah, I was like I was kind of felt bad because like apparently Pixar was not given the funds to compensate Mindy Kaling or Bill Hader more.
Hmm.
I think this was for all the other emotions that weren't played by Amy Poehler because she was given $5 million and like the others were only given like 2% of her salary or something like that, and that's like ridiculous.
Yeah, that
So
is ridiculous, but yeah,
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 especially for big actors like Bill Hader and
Mindy Kaling.
Mindy Kaling,
Yeah,
Velma
but
Girl, but
yeah, but
um,
anyway, when it comes to the replacements, I was a little nervous because sometimes because here's my take on whenever an actor is replaced for a movie midway through the film, especially if they're still alive. I don't mind it if they fit the role and I'm not reminded that they were replaced. Like if they were replaced and it's obviously a distraction, then I'll voice my concerns. I did that last year with Chicken Run Donovan. Like, I like that movie, but and no disrespect to Tanawi Newton, she's a great actress, but she's not Ginger. That role was Julia Sawala's, and it only made things worse because they used archival footage in that movie, and it actually has Sawala's voice, and I was like, why did they replace her? It made no sense, especially if she can still do the voice. And
yeah.
I still like the movie for the record, but stuff like that does bother me. But when it comes to
I know they
Hader and
voiced
Kaling,
they replaced they replaced Slinky Dog's voice in Toy Story 3 because I think the actor for him passed away
yeah,
a
yeah,
while before that.
yeah,
But I
Jim
never even
Varney,
noticed that as a kid, or
yeah.
probably don't. I don't even notice it, in the movie itself
No,
anymore.
no, I knew that as a kid, but it doesn't bother me because yeah, I knew
Seems
Jim.
seamless.
Yeah, it's seamless. Like I don't mind it if an actor passes and they have to recast, then I totally understand that. Like Jim Varney, for instance. Yeah, Jim Varney had passive lung cancer after Toy Story 2, so obviously they did that. And I
And
remember
also
when
the
they
Ernest
were
movies.
yeah, yeah, but I remember when they were interviewing the actor who did replace Slinky for Toy Story 3, they were talking about Varney, and he was like, "You really did capture the essence of Jim when playing Slinky." So I was like, "Yeah, like if they replace them, if like my stance on whenever an actor is replaced is if they passed, I can totally understand that. That doesn't bother me. If they're still alive and they're replaced, that's another thing entirely. And my stance is this:
Yeah.
if they are replaced and I'm not bothered by it in the movie, then I won't care. And in the case of Inside Out 2, yeah, I will say I did kind of miss Bill Hader as Spear, but it wasn't a huge thing because I thought Tony Hale was still a very good replacement for him. Liza Lapira for Disgust, though, I did not remember. I like watching it. I was like, she was Disgust. Like I didn't like if you told me that Mindy Kaling, she was initially played by Mindy Kaling, I would have like, oh okay, and I would have been like, yeah, I still thought she was great as Disgust. She really took on that role and made her her own. Like she still felt like the Disgust from the first movie.
I forgot that like I kind of knew earlier on in the movie because I've seen like the clips of it and stuff like that. But like I think as the movie went on, I kind of I forgot that they were being voiced by different actors.
Yeah, same,
You know,
same.
I don't my one of my predictions before because I thought like when it was revealed in the teaser and also like the log line that there's going to be more emotions that the other ones that the new ones probably were going to be voiced by like A-list celebrities or something like that. And I thought they probably ate up a good chunk of the budget. Maybe that's why they didn't compensate Kaling and Hader. But
Yeah. But
But apparently, no.
Apart from Hawk and Iowa Debris, who plays Envy, and maybe Paul Walter Hauser, I mean, he's starting to become a somewhat of a rising talent, but it wasn't a huge cast. And one thing I like about Pixar is they don't go for the obvious choice because of their big names. You know, they always go for what their voices sound like. Like I remember when they were doing the casting for Onward, they didn't cast Tom Holland and Chris Pratt because they were big names. They cast them because they fit the roles. Like Chris Pratt's like over the top energetic voice fit for Barley, and Tom Holland's like nervousy panicky voice worked for Ian. You know, that's like that works. You know, and that's the same thing for Inside Out too. Like they cast Maya Hawke and Iowa Debris and Paul Walter Hauser and Adele Exarchopoulos as these emotions because they fit the characters. They were chosen not because they were big names, but because, you know, they were made for the roles, essentially, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I like the new choices. Maya Hawke, I think, is good. I guess she wouldn't be my ideal choice to play Anxiety. I guess like in my head, I kind of pictured a slightly cartoonier voice for like Anxiety based on like her design.
Mm-hmm.
But like I think like looking at the design beforehand, like before Maya Hawke was cast, like I was saying like I kind of pictured like a Richard Horvitz in my head as like you know sort of thing, just like a kind of like a over the top cartoony voice like Roger Rabbit or something. But you know when there's like way worse choices you could have for her. So
Yeah, yeah. Like my stance is this when it comes to celebrity voice acting. Like I've already voiced my frustration on pop star. I don't get overly annoyed at celebrity voice actors. Like my big role is this: if they fit the role and they work as this character, then I won't mind. You know, if they don't fit the role, that's when I'll get annoyed. Like the last time I got annoyed in an animated film what relied overly on celebrity voice casting and they did not fit these characters at all was DC League of Super Pets, because that cast was just completely utterly wrong. Like Mark Maron as Lex Luthor, what? Like
and
why?
Dwayne Johnson, Kevin Hart, and like Keanu Reeves apparently voiced Batman.
Yeah, it just completely wrong cast. Like the only one in that cast that that worked was Kate McKinnon. She was the only one that kind of fit. Like every other cast member was wrong. But every time I heard Mark Maron talking, I just maybe it was because of recency bias. I just kept thinking of Mr. Snake from The Bad Guys. That's all I heard coming out of this character because he was so perfect for that character in Bad Guys, and he was just so wrong as Lex Luthor. You know?
Yeah. I also remember, I guess, like the last casting choice that like I thought was really wrong was like the guy who voiced Cranky Kong in the Mario movie. What's his face? I forget his name, but like he's like, yeah, yeah. But I was picturing like, you know, I mean, Larry David is right there, you know. So I was like, you know,
That would have been funny.
yeah,
I
yeah. I mean, I think I mean, there's great examples of like celebrities who voice like characters in animated movies. My first two like examples are like Monsters Inc. and Shrek. John Goodman, Billy Crystal. Those are like Pitch Perfect. Mike Myers. I can't picture anyone else playing Shrek but him actually, which is kind of funny because
yeah.
you at first you wouldn't like think Mike Myers as like a green ugly ogre.
Yeah, and also it's interesting you say that because Myers was not the first choice. The first
Yeah,
choice
it
was
was
Chris Farley.
Chris Farley. He passed, so
Yeah,
he basically requested that like they rewrite the script to fit in with his like character or portrayal, and
yeah, and you also bring up Mike, and you also bring out John Goodman and Billy Crystal, and that's also great because I remember Goodman was not the first choice for Sully. You know who they wanted at first?
who?
Bill Murray,
Yeah, I don't see that.
and I don't see it either. But Billy Crystal was always considered for Mike Wazowski because I don't know if you know this story, but I think this is pretty well known. Billy Crystal was offered the role of Buzz Lightyear initially for Toy Story,
Yeah, he turned
and
it
he turned it
down.
down. And when he saw the movie, he admitted that it was one of the biggest mistakes he ever made. And then Pixar kept it to heart. And then when they were looking for characters to voice for Mike, they always wanted Billy Crystal. So when they called up Billy Crystal, it was like Pixar's on the phone. He was like, "Tell him I'm in." He was like, and he stated for the record he has no regrets about turning down Buzz Lightyear because he admits he was wrong for the role and Tim Allen was right. And he admits that he was perfect for Mike, and he stated that Mike is actually his favorite character he's ever played.
Yeah,
Which
I can't like Billy Crystal. I'm kind of glad he passed on Toy Story. I can't see him voicing Woody or Buzz, especially in that movie. I can have. He was definitely like I feel like he was definitely written for the part of Mike.
Yeah, he absolutely was. Like, I can't see him playing Buzz Lightyear. Like, but it comes to Woody though, that was always going to be Tom Hanks's performance because they always wanted Tom
Yeah.
in
Also,
that
Steve
movie.
Buscemi as Randall
Yeah,
is great as villains in
I
movies. So
I love Steve Buscemi. He's such a he just such a nice guy and also just such a fun character actor. And he's so
yeah,
good as Randall Boggs. I love him.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. But so who was the voice actress for Ennui again? I know I keep forgetting her
her
name.
name is Adele Exarchopoulos. She was a French actress. She was in Blue is the Warmest Color. That's what I mainly know her from. Uh, she was also the thing I also know her from is that when Disney dubbed Elemental in France, she was actually the French voice of Ember. Believe it or not. But
Interesting. It kind of reminds me. You know what I found out like not too long ago? I rewatched Parasite, and I found out like the main actor for the father character, he voiced Alex the Lion in the Korean dub for Madagascar. I just think that was really funny. So
huh, that's really funny. I did not know that. Yeah, it's always funny when I see it when I hear like actors in foreign movies voice dub over characters for you know animated movies made in English. Kind of like how here in America a lot of big name American or British actors dub over films made by Studio Ghibli in Japan.
yeah, I still haven't seen the English dub for How Do You Live yet, but I've heard it's pretty
Oh, it's
good.
great. It's great. When I saw that movie, I saw it in English. It is so good. Robert Pattinson is incredible in that movie. He is on another level in that dub. Oh my
I always
god.
try to go with like the original language because I always like prefer watching it how it was originally made by the original creators. But I mean, I'll definitely get to
I
the English dub at some point.
Yeah. I usually watch animated movies dubbed. The only time I will turn to sub is if the dub is really really awful. I never watch live action foreign movies dubbed though. Never.
Yeah,
Like it's always bad.
it's always
Um,
bad.
I remember watching a Siskel and Ebert review. They reviewed this horrible French movie called Little India in Big City in 1996, and it has such a god awful dub. And there's this dad character, and all of a sudden you hear Jeff Bennett's voice coming out of him, and it's like, what are they doing? What? Why are they doing that? Stop! No, don't stop! What? What? Stop! This shouldn't be happening. You know?
Yeah, I remember Kung Pao made fun of bad dubs in movies, and that's a parody movie that I think is ahead of its time in some ways.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's some good parodies out there. I mean, Airplane,
Yeah,
classic.
I mean, I guess for like the best parody movies, I'd say like Holy Grail. That's
Oh,
like
Holy Grail! I love that movie. Monty Python. The Holy Grail was that was the comedy in my high school. Everyone knew it. Everyone loved it.
yeah.
Um, but
Really? Because like it's interesting because like my other classmates in high school like they liked the Holy Grail. They didn't love it though. They're more into like more like contemporary comedies like Hot Rod and stuff like that. So
that's weird. Yeah, but I don't know. Most of my classmates were into contemporary movies, I think. But when I was in high school, everyone knew Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Everyone knew that movie. It was so strange, but everyone knew that movie and everyone loved it.
it seems like your classmates had better taste than mine did. um,
Well, my film
I'm
school had some pretty
joking.
bad.
Yeah,
I know. My film school had some pretty. My film school was pretty snobbish, and they had some weird tastes. So, maybe you're not wrong. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I was sat next to a girl in a class who didn't know who John Williams was, and she was studying movies, and I was like, "How are you studying film and you don't know who John Williams is?" Even my dad, who is a doctor, knows who John Williams is.
I think it is. Yeah, I really like how Riley's more developed as a character. I
Yeah,
think
I do too.
I felt like I definitely appreciated how they gave her more spotlight and development in this movie, even down to like one of the first like scenes where like Julie's basically saying how Riley's a teenager now and she's like doing all these things, and like it was definitely giving her more character just through like all those like small little snippets of like that montage of like her feeding like a kitten on the steps and like cooking like a really bad turkey or chicken for her parents. Like the
parents, and
yeah,
her getting braces and whatnot,
yeah.
and
It was showing that she's a very flawed individual, but she also cares.
yeah, I like that they really showcased the whole point of the movie is showcasing that she was becoming more and more flawed, and the flaws were starting to catch up with her essentially, and that she couldn't hide away from the fact that she's not the most perfect person out there. And like I said, yeah, she's becoming a lot more developed. Like I remember that they added like the stream of consciousness, and there's a scene where she's talking to the girl Val, and she mentions that she could go for a slice of pizza, and then all of a sudden you go to the stream of consciousness and you see the emotions looking at the water, and then all of a sudden there's a slice of deep dish that passes them by.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of good creative sequences in this. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mentioned the video game character, didn't I? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and we talked
yeah,
about Bluefy.
Bluefy and yeah, there's like there's I guess like they added there's also the parade of like future careers, like potential like future careers she could have. Like I forget what those
Mm-hmm.
were specifically, but I thought I
I
would
remember
say
they
this is
grabbed the judge. They were talking about the teacher, and they were like, "Low pay," just like that. Just
yeah that there was like a lot of good sequences like that and brainstorm as well. And then I also think that like it was a really good coming of age story, especially. I think they tackled that angle even better than the first one because like
mm-hmm.
this one is like more diving into like her like will she or will she not like basically kind of like throw away her friends in favor of like staying cool with these older kids or whatever. And
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was well developed. And like even that scene when like she was like getting she was trying to steal that notebook from like her like her coach's like
coach.
way her coach's room.
Yeah, it's a really stressful scene because you're
Yeah,
like,
I was like, oh
"Oh
no.
my god, you shouldn't go in that." And then all of a sudden, you see sadness take control of her, and it was like, "Oh, thank God that happened." I was like, "But oh no, sadness is in there now. The other emotions are gonna get worried," and it's like the way the film is so stress inducing is word, because I remember reading that one of the films that there are two big films I remember they used influence from. One was All About Eve, which is a great movie, which I can totally see by, because it's basically about a character who unexpectedly joins a party, wants to meet her hero, and basically becomes upstages them, and pushes them out of the picture, and everyone thinks that this new person is a lot better than the other one, and that what she's doing is right and the old one is wrong, which is essentially what is going on with Joy and Anxiety. But the biggest film that I remember reading about that a lot of people were curious about was that the film that
Uncut Gems.
Inside Out 2 Inch. Yeah, it was Uncut Gems. Yeah.
I thought that was really funny when I first read that too. But like they were talking about more the technical aspects, not the story. There was no scene
Mm-hmm.
where anxiety was like, "This is how I win" or whatever. So, you know,
Yeah, but still, Uncut Gems is a very stressful, inducing
yeah,
story. It's very frantic, which also contributes to this movie, because this is also a very frantic sequel, and anxiety is a very frantic emotion. It's very rushed and panicky. You make a lot of stupid decisions that you don't think through when you're anxious,
yeah. It did. It
and
also did a really good job of like embracing a very animated feel to it. If that makes sense, where
mm-hmm.
like the characters are still very vibrant and like they still move very quickly, but not in a way that's like distracting or annoying. Like I think the whole sequence near the end where like anxiety is getting so stressed that she creates this whole storm of orange was really technically visually well done. And it
Yeah,
showed.
that was a really cool scene. It was a really good, I know cartoon Twitter's gonna throw a fit over it, but yeah, I really liked how it showed this, panic attack essentially. And it's also just over a very seemingly minor thing, because that happens. And I guess I'll talk about how this film impacted me, because I said before, I've been really struggling a lot with anxiety lately. Last September, I was going through something, and I was on edge, because I was in my last semester. I was in my last year of college, and I was worried I was going to be losing my friends and whatnot. And very late in September, I had a massive panic attack, probably the worst one I ever had. And I was just like in a closet, I was like crunched up in a ball, and I was like shivering, and my heart was just like pounding. And it was one of the most, it was one of the scariest things I ever experienced. And it was also over something really, really minor too, and that really pushed me over the edge. And watching this movie, it really hit, especially when you saw the way that this panic attack is depicted and the way anxiety is just rushing over it. And then when Joy enters the storm, she just sees anxiety and she's just frozen in place, but flickering and glitching almost because she's moving so fast. And then you see this like close up of anxiety, and you just see her with this worried, anxious look on her face, and then you see that tear just slowly move down her eye, and it was like, oh my god, this hits. And
Yeah. It was a well done
yeah,
panic attack scene. I know that like every time the words panic attack are muttered or uttered, Twitter is just in a giant frenzy. But that's just how Twitter is. So yeah,
yeah, Twitter's always in a giant frenzy when it comes to animation, and I really try to stay
especially
out of that
Pixar. Like
shit.
that's one thing I
Mm-hmm.
forgot to mention is that like I think even before this movie was coming out, like I saw people were saying, "Oh, I'm just gonna pirate it because it'll be bad" or something like that, and like
I'm
there are
so
people.
sick of this. Every time that happens with every single Pixar movie, I've noticed this ever since Onward. Every single one that has come out this decade has gone through this shit, and I'm so sick of it. I'm so
I think the only one I
sick
haven't
of
seen
it.
that got like flack before is probably Lightyear. Probably because like people are just like, I don't know who cares about Lightyear, but yeah, I mean, it was just like yeah, I mean, like I remember like people were saying like there's rumors like I saw someone say or this is probably I think it was a rumor from a couple people I've heard from is that people like from the CinemaCon like screening were saying keep your expectations low. I still have not seen a source for that, or like from any
Neither have
articles or
I.
anything like that. So that was probably just like false.
I think that was false because I remember the buzz was very, very good, and then I remember seeing a Film Insider say, and one of my friends say that Film Insider is saying that this movie is going to be very, very big and very positive. So I knew for a fact that that was probably wrong. But
Because I
yeah,
remember
like I
when.
remember.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, yeah, because I just remember that that always happens when it comes to Pixar. Like it's people just really overreact and think to themselves, "Oh my god, we're gonna this movie's not gonna be good." Like it happens every single movie. Like Twitter throws a fit, and then the movie comes out, and then the storm just kind of weathers. Because I've noticed that because it happened with Soul, it happened with Luca, it happened with Turning Red, it also kind of happened with Elemental, and it's also happening with this. Like once the film comes out, the storm just really instantly weathers, and that just kind of vanishes. And I hope, for the love of God, that it ends soon. I really hope we do not go through this next June with
Yeah.
Elio, because I'm tired of it. I'm so tired of it.
Maybe Elon Musk can do us all a favor and just like just like how what if he just completely destroys all of Twitter or something like that? So like all those
What?
people would just like
Or
touch some
even better,
grass.
why not can the muskrat just go away entirely and never come back?
Yeah.
Like fuck your ex, seriously.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, like people were saying like that. I guess one thing I was like worried about though is like when P Doctor said that Inside Out 2 was his favorite Pixar movie. I was getting like
Mm-hmm.
James Gunn, The Flash is the next great superhero movie kind of vibes. Or like, I was like, oh no, like every
Oh,
time.
you mean when David
I
Zaslav
think
said that about the Flash?
James Gunn said The Flash was like a great movie like before it came out too, and like Tom Cruise
Mm-hmm.
said the same thing, Terry Crews, Edgar Wright, everyone said all these things about it.
Oh, they were real. I really think there was a lot of bribery with the Flash. But yeah, I can see your complaint. I can see why you were worried when Pete Doctor said that. I was a little worried too, but a part of me was a little bit more confident because I think Pete has a lot more trust in his filmmakers. Like him saying that really showcases, yeah, he trusts the filmmaker because this was a world he created. This is a world he knows inside out. No pun intended. But yeah, it's but yeah, I totally can see your thing because when creatives say that, sometimes you're like, what were they paid to say that? Are they just overhyping it to get people interested in the movie? But having seen the movie, I can totally see why Pete said that because he made an impressive first movie, and this sequel really does the impossible and carries it in a way that feels very natural.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. This is like I'd say this is like the closest to like a really good like DreamWorks sequel, like where like it progresses the story instead of like kind of regressing it. Because like that's
Mm-hmm.
what I love about sequels like Shrek 2, Kung Fu Panda 2, Puss in Boots 2.
Yeah,
Even though no one really remembers the first movie very much, you can kind of just watch it as its own standalone movie. But it's still like
I
they
still
still
like the first
progress.
Puss in Boots.
Yeah, I mean,
Just the
I think it's fine. I just don't. I mean, again, I actually have fond memories of that first Puss in Boots movie. I watched it for my
yeah.
birthday, and had a whole movie theater birthday party, themed after it. But I just haven't.
Mm-hmm.
I really haven't rewatched it in years, so maybe it's better than I
Yeah.
remember. But I don't think it's awful. But
Yeah, I
um,
don't think it's awful too. Yeah, the sequel's better, but yeah. But anyway, like, yeah, I do agree with what you're saying because yeah, those are the sequels I obviously love, especially when it came to DreamWorks sequels. Because I think Shrek 2 is better than the first Shrek. I think How to Train Your Dragon 2 is better than the first How to Train Your Dragon. Kung Fu Panda 2, holy shit, that is like a massive step up. That whole scene where Poe discovers his past. Oh my god, that
yeah,
is just brilliant filmmaking.
apparently Guillermo del
Um,
Toro and Charlie Kaufman had some influence on the movie, and it
Yeah, they
shows.
did. Yeah, Coffin did an unrated credited screen rewrite. Guillermo del Toro was the one that came up with the whole genocide concept. That was
Yeah,
his idea. A lot of the dark ideas you see in DreamWorks' films in the 2010s, like in Rise of the Guardians, Kung Fu Panda 2, and How to Train Your Dragon 2. Yeah, those were del Toro's ideas. Those were all him.
that's really cool. I want my. They should have asked him to direct one of their movies. Maybe they have. Maybe
Yeah,
he's
they
just
should.
busy, but he's had a ton of like unrealized projects, so maybe that's one of them.
Yeah. Hey, we're gonna get another animated movie from him soon with the Buried Giant. I can't wait for that one.
That's cool.
Um,
Yeah. His Oscar speech for Pinocchio, especially, is still one of my highlights of like the Oscars that year because like I Oscars are a bunch of cynical Hollywood, billionaires like looking to make themselves look better, but that was a genuinely beautiful speech that he made.
oh, agreed.
I'm glad he
Agreed.
won the Oscar for that. I still preferred Puss in Boots: The Last Wish overall, but I think I am absolutely glad he won the Oscar just for that speech alone, and because he
I
also
am too.
and because that movie was also fantastic in its own right.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I'm with you. Though I personally would have wanted Turning Red to win. That was my favorite of 2022. But I'm more than happy Guillermo del Toro won
Yeah,
because yeah, like you said, I think the movie is fantastic, and also that speech was a needed speech. But yeah, uh, but yeah, getting back to this movie. Yeah, I think yeah, I can see why you were worried when they were doing that stuff like that. Yeah, because filmmakers can sometimes overhype their own work, and then when it comes out, it's like, it's not that good. I mean, and yeah, we've seen that before, where directors overpraise their films and think it's the best thing that's ever come out of the studio when it's not. I mean, we talked about it earlier with Lasseter in Cars 2 because he said it's the most beautiful film Pixar has ever made, and it's really not even before that, and especially after. I mean, Pixar now has Coco and Soul and Luca and this, and they are so much more visually interesting than Cars 2.
I remember my
And
friend. I showed him that clip, and he said, "Well, of course, if he's like in charge of like the studio at the time, if of course he's not going to say something like, yeah, we made a bad movie. He's going to be like, because that would be like that would be downplaying the artists, the studio that financed the movie, and pretty much everything. So he's not going to put his job on the line and make himself look bad. Just to tell the truth. So he's going to lie, of course,
yeah,
but."
I mean, I'll give Pete Docter credit when it comes to Pixar shortcomings. He stood by the films, but he said, "Yeah, we could have done better," and that's the mature way to handle it, and not
Yeah,
just,
I liked how
"Oh,
he
I don't
admitted.
listen to critics." You
Like
know.
I like how he admitted like Lightyear just didn't really work well because we didn't really we weren't very clear with our audience or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We asked too much of them is what I think is why how he phrased it.
Yeah. Like I think yeah, and that was definitely the mature way he could have handled it. He admitted that he expected too much, and he says, "Well, we're still proud of the movie." He admitted we made mistakes in how it was released and how we could have handled it, and we're gonna try to look at it and do better than that, you know. Um, but yeah, I think when it came to him, praising Inside Out 2, that is now that I've seen the movie and now that you've seen it, I can totally see where he's coming from with him saying it's probably his favorite Pixar movie because one, Kelsey Mann had to take on his own world and his own characters, and that's a very daunting task to do, especially when it's as acclaimed as that first movie. And two, this is the bigger thing, I think it also just showcased that he now has a whole lot of trust in his filmmakers. He's not going to allow them. I think one thing I've noticed about Pixar's recent movies is that you don't feel like the directors are being dictated to by the upper heads. Like, it feels like they're allowed to be making the movies they want to make. Like, I can see their individual voices within these projects, which is something that when you look back on the movies that, especially the ones that Lasseter meddled with, like, I can't tell if it was their project. Like Brave doesn't feel like a full Brenda Chapman movie, and Good Dinosaur doesn't feel like something Peter Sohn would fully do. Mainly because it wasn't, because obviously there was meddling going on wrong. And again, if Peter Stone had completely fully started over from scratch, maybe he could have made The Good Dinosaur his own movie, but it doesn't feel like his movie, especially when you look at it compared to Elemental. When I watch Elemental, I'm like, yes, this does feel like a
It feels like
Peter
one
Stone
person
movie.
wrote and oversaw the production of everything.
Yeah, yeah. And when I look at every movie they made this decade, it feels like it came from a single voice. It does not feel like it came from upper heads telling him, we need to make it like this. Like,
The only
I don't
one
know
I'd
if you.
say I felt that way is like Lightyear. That felt like it had like
Mm,
a million rewrites or something like that, and I'm just like, what? Like, because I
and
think,
that's understandable.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
like even I saw like I even watched like deleted scenes of that movie, and like I saw I mean the original version of what they had like wasn't great or anything, but I felt like it made more sense for what they were going for, and like I just look at the final product, I'm like, what? That
Yeah,
was
and I mean, yeah, I mean, I'll give it this when it comes to. I mean, when I look at other deleted scenes for other Pixar movies that came out of this decade, and I'll say this: it could have been worse. Like, I could have seen more Lasseter influence. I think like
yeah.
two big ones I can think of were Luca and Elemental, because they nearly had those things. Like, one thing, last did you know this? When Lasseter was still working at Pixar, he was telling Enrico Casarosa to push away from the smaller slice of life Ghibli vibes of Luca, and he wanted it to be bigger. Like, did you know there was going to be a climax where Alberto turned into a kraken?
Oh damn, that would have been so bad.
It
That's
it's so bad.
isn't that basically like that Ruby Gillman movie for like DreamWorks, but like before it
Uh,
came out?
I not really. I mean, there's yeah, Ruby Gillman did involve a kraken, but it's mainly. But Ruby Gillman was a lot more like turning red, believe it or not, and not like
Yeah, it was. I guess
Luca.
I just thought of that like she turns into a giant kraken. Like I thought of that movie.
Yeah, I can see why, but it was like Alberto actually turns into like a mindless kraken. That's what I was like. Um, like he was causing damage, and Porto Rosso was being damaged, and Luca and Julia had to stop him. It's such a bad idea. Here's another one that was really worse. I saw in the deleted scenes of Elemental. There was going to be a twist villain in that movie, and do you know who it was going to be?
Who?
You are, and this makes no sense. Wade's mother, Brooke.
That would have been so funny.
I saw that, and it basically the film would have played out normally with the whole leak thing, and then Ember and Wade would have discovered that someone is causing the water to go into Firetown, and then they go to the dinner scene, and there's that whole crying scene, and then after Wade makes Ember cry, you see Brooke's face, and she looks frustrated, and she pulls Ember into another room, and Ember tells her about the plans, and it's revealed that she is the one that's flooding Firetown, and she's doing it to protect her mother's name because apparently she had a grudge against fire people, and she tries to blackmail Ember into keeping this a secret. And the only, like, she'll keep this a secret and stop fighting Firetown if she breaks up with Wade. And I remember just sitting there watching this deleted scene. I was like, this is terrible. And I'm like, thank God they did not put this into the movie.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
God they
God.
realized
They
this
should
was
have
a
made Claude the
bad
twist
idea.
villain.
Like, Like they realized this was a bad idea and they cut it because one, Ember's mother being Wade's mother being the villain makes no logical sense whatsoever. And two, having her be supportive of their relationship makes a lot more sense because, it encourages her to realize, maybe it's right for the two to be together and that, what Wade's Ember's father has taught her isn't 100% accurate exactly. So it was a good idea. So one thing that, and another movie I know for a fact probably could have been meddled if Lasseter was still on board the company was Turning Red. Like, that movie would not have ended up the way it was at all if he
It
was
probably
still
would have
there.
ended up like Brave, probably.
Yeah, it probably would have been. It would have been really sanitized. Like, a lot of the crazy stuff you see in the movie, like the whole nightmare scene and some of the crazy jokes and the over-the-top shenanigans, and like, I can't imagine that movie being any way different than it is right now. Like, I can't imagine the movie being like, I mean, the fact that the movie is the way it is something I'm grateful for. I mean, that movie has one of the funniest jokes I've seen this decade so far, and that's that one scene where May goes by Devin at the uh
Awooga.
yes. Oh god.
You know what's funny? Speaking of that, I think they referenced that in this movie. They remember that part when Riley and her friends are like "awooga" or something like that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
like,
I
is
think
that
it
an
was
Inside
actually
Out? I mean, is that a
yeah,
Turning
and
Red reference?
I don't know if it's a Turning Red reference because it was mainly a reference to the fact that Riley's on a team called the Foghorns.
Ah,
And I think that's
okay.
what they went for, but if it was actually a Turning Red reference, that would have been really funny. But just like I still say this. Awooga is one of the funniest jokes in a Pixar movie I've seen in a long time. It's still one of my favorite jokes this decade. Gets me every single time. That expression, the way Rosalie Chang says it. Oh, it's just I'm just cracking myself up thinking about it. Oh my god. Uh, but
Yeah, but I
yeah.
think we talked about the voice replacements, right? You like Tony Hale and the Eliza Lapira. I don't mind that the fact that they got rid of like Mindy Kaling. Bill Hader, though, I feel like you could have still brought him back though, because like
Yeah.
I don't, not that I mind Tony Hale. I think he's a good replacement. It just like I think they could have brought him back because Bill Hader is like such a pretty prominent voice actor in like a lot of animated movies.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I agree. I
He was
mean,
in The Clyde with a Chance of Meatballs and some other ones I'm not thinking of quite yet, but
yeah. Yeah. I think Claudia was his first movie where he played Flint Lockwood. I think that was the first
yeah,
time I heard his name. But yeah, I'm a little bummed they didn't get back Bill Hader as Fear, but like I said, Tony Hale's a good replacement, and yeah, Liza Lipira replacing Mindy Kaling, I have no problems with it at all.
yeah,
Mostly because yeah, I've soured on Mindy Kaling too, and also yeah, I did not, and also Liza Lipira just took on that role so flawlessly. Like she just, it was still disgust. It was still the same disgust I know and love.
yeah. I didn't really notice it as much like as the movie went on. Like I just like I was just like watching it as like the discussed character I already knew. So it was definitely
Mm-hmm.
like yeah, it was definitely well cast overall. Um I think the whole thing because like we are talking about how about how anxiety is like basically I kind of thought of her as like the villain throughout most of the movie, but like I guess like since she does come around at the end and she wasn't trying to be an active threat, she's not really like a villain though. She's more of
Yeah,
like is she
she's
an,
an
I guess an
antagonist.
antagonist,
She's an
yeah.
antagonist.
Antagonist, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because um,
She does
all
bad
villains are
things, but
antagonists,
not
but
to harm
not
Riley.
all antagonists are villains. That's how I say it. It's
Hmm.
like every villain is an antagonist, but not every antagonist is a villain. Yeah, that's something I noticed with all the Pixar films this decade, except for Lightyear. There's no villains in any of the movies. There's all antagonists. I mean, you still have that antagonistic dragon curse in Onward, but mainly there's no villains outwardly, except for maybe Hercule and Luca. But he was more like just your standard bully character. He's not a villain. He was definitely more of an antagonist than a villain. But
I still kind
but
of do
yeah,
miss
like
Pixar villains though, like Syndrome and Lotso though. But
yeah,
I don't think like all the new ones need them. It would just be like it would be nice to have them back eventually.
yeah. I hope we can get more villains again. I'm sure we will. Um, Yeah, and I'm sure we will. Yeah, like I said, I don't mind a story not having a villain. If a story needs a villain, it has a villain. But yeah, from what I'm seeing, the stories that we've gotten don't need villains, so I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think when it comes to Inside Out 2, yeah, I really want to talk about the one scene that also really got me in the movie, and that is once the emotions reach the back of the head to get the sense of self. Okay, for those that don't know, anxiety takes the Riley's old good sense of self and just throws it to the back of the head, and that's basically the thing that the emotions have to get alongside getting back to headquarters. So that's essentially the MacGuffin of the movie. And there's one scene when they get there and they see all of these emotions, and they're so, they're not, and they're pretty negative, and they're pretty bad memories. I mean, I don't know if you saw this when the emotions that were there. Some of the memories you saw there were the bad memories
From the
of
first movie.
Riley. Yeah, from the first movie where Riley runs away and steals the mom's credit card and whatnot. And then and then Joy says a line that is so haunting, and it's so brave for an animated movie, especially one that's for made for families. And that maybe that's what happens when you get older. You feel less joy, and it's like, damn, that is such a cutting line. Like, it reminds me a lot of the line from The Breakfast Club where Allison goes, "When you grow up, your heart dies," and then Bender goes, "Who cares?
Hmm.
I care." You
Yeah.
know?
Oh yeah, like definitely that part when like I think I did mention this before, but like the part when like Joy is like when the other emotions ask like what do we do now, like because like it seems like everything's doom and gloom, and she's like I don't know. I mean, I don't have all the answers to everything,
Yeah,
and like she's like
yeah, like
she's even of the belief at that point that like maybe like Riley doesn't need them anymore.
yeah, like you could tell. Like, one thing I really like about Joy as a protagonist is that now she's really like a fragile character. She's trying to remain optimistic. She's trying to be this beacon of positivity, and yet she can't always maintain it because she goes through a lot. Especially, Riley goes through some bad things, and then anxiety enters the picture, and also you got the constant bickering of the other emotions, and everyone's looking towards her like, what do we do? What is your answer? And she's like, I don't know. I don't have the answers for everything. I'm not perfect. And that is really good character development because it truly shows that she's just, even though she's an emotion, she's a genuine person. She's not like a flat character.
She's
She's
not a
a
Smurf.
she's not a Smurf. Yeah, she's a three-dimensional character that is just trying her best. And then right after they get back and also they stop anxiety, there's two things that really stands out in that ending apart from the panic attack, and that's that the emotions that they uh send to the back of the head, like when they're trying to get back to headquarters, they decide to ride the avalanche down to the sense of self, and yet this sense of self, and yet these bad memories create this newer sense of self, and it's a very flawed sense of self essentially that showcases that she's trying her best, and yet she's not perfect essentially. Like, you have these things like, I'm a good person, I don't do good things, I'm not good enough, all that. And that is something a lot of kids need to hear, because they're going to have a lot of these thoughts, especially teenagers are going to have these thoughts that they're going to think that they're not good enough and they're not going to be 100% flawless human beings. But that's normal. That's something that they need to hear. It's normal to not feel perfect. It's something I really needed, and it's a big reason why I also cried at this movie like I did the first movie, because I needed that after I had that horrible panic attack back in September. And then you have the moment right after Riley reconciles with her friends after she has the panic attack, and you see like little particles floating from Joy going to the console,
Like she wants to
and
feel happy. Like she's in control of
yeah,
her emotions.
like she's in control of her emotions, and Sadness goes, "Joy, I think Riley wants you." And I was like, oh my god, this is so genius. Like, it showcases that, yeah, sometimes the emotions might not think they need them, but yeah, sometimes we need to have those emotions. We want to feel happy, you know? We want to have that kind of sense of joy. And I really like that it showcases that Riley is not controlled completely by these emotions. She's not like a robot like character. She's like a human being that has her own beliefs and identity. So the fact that it has the thing that it shows Joey being navigated to the console by Riley herself, and also the fact that the sense of self that is blossomed isn't that perfect sense of self that was at the beginning of the movie, but all these different flawed senses of self that showcases that there's a lot of these, anxious thoughts going through her head, that she's not good enough, she's not perfect, she's kind of a crummy friend and whatnot, she does bad things.
Yeah.
It really is something that I think is needed, especially in a movie for teenagers and children, because they need to have that kind of message that, yes, you're going to feel these things. You're going to go through this, but that is normal. That is okay. You don't have to feel bad for that. And it really makes me wish that a movie like this, like, it makes me wish I was younger, because if I had that when I was younger, I would have needed that. But, even now as a 23, almost 24-year-old adult that also had that horrible panic attack back in September, it's still something I needed to hear. And I'm just grateful for that.
Yeah. And I think I've recently interpreted, whereas like the first movie is about like kind of the sadness of like growing up and change and that kind of thing. This is more about the anxieties of, changing and sort of, you know, finding who you are
Mm-hmm.
essentially.
Yeah,
So
finding who you are, like,
it's a different
yeah,
kind of like the first one explored like sadness. This is like the more anxiety induced. So
yeah, exactly. Like, sadness was the guiding force behind the first movie. Like, what does it mean to move away, grow up, leave behind the things you love? And in this one, it's like, what happens when you get older and things are happening all too fast around you, and you do not know how to stop it, and you're wondering, what do others think of me? What happens if my friends leave me behind? Am I gonna fit in? Am I gonna be good enough to do this? And also, just, there's also a lot of creative imagery with that. Like, even when Riley's going to the hockey camp with her friends, and you see the other emotions, and all of a sudden, in the one of her friends' mind, there's like a teapot on it, and then all of a sudden it spills, and one of the emotions goes, "Oh gosh, you spilled the tea!" And then all of a sudden the friend just blurts out that they're moving to a new school, and it's like, I really, really like little details like that. It's like, no one's perfect, and that, we're gonna go through a lot of changes, and we're worried about how others are gonna, process stuff, and we're not gonna be able to keep bottling everything up, essentially.
yeah, they do literally bottle up the core emotions in this movie. So yeah,
Yeah, they bottle them up and lock them in the safe.
yeah,
Um,
and a
Also,
peanut butter
like I said, there's
jar.
also the peanut butter jar, yeah. And like I said, there's also like all other great callbacks in the first movie. Even in that scene, like, I don't know if you noticed that there was the mind beans that were in the subconscious basement that are actually played by Frank Oz and Dave Goles of the Muppets. And
Yeah.
when after they get knocked out, you see one of their hats, and there's a little tape that says "My hat" on it, because that was the thing that they were arguing over in the first movie. It was like, "See, it's my hat," because it says "my hat." No, 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 this is my hat.
Oh, I remember
And it
that
has the
part in the
words "my
first
hat."
movie. Yeah.
Yeah, like, that was a great callback. I saw that. Like, I was like, "Oh my gosh."
I think someone pointed out that same thing too. I also liked how they brought back John Ratzenberger. This is like his first movie he's back in since like Onward. And like
Yeah,
as soon as
yeah.
like I found out he was coming back, I was thinking of like that Sonic 2 gif where like Agent Stone is like he's
Uh,
back.
yeah, I kept thinking of that too. And when I was like, when I found out, I was like, "Oh, thank God he left Lasseter. Thank God."
Oh, is he not working for Skydance anymore? Or he's not going to be in any of their movies?
I hope not. I really
Oh,
do
hope
not want
not.
him to be in. I really do not want him to be in more. I
I think
mean,
Apple gave up on Skydance. I think now they're
yeah, they
just going
gave
to
up on them
Netflix
because, yeah, I know why they gave up on them, because
because Luck
they
probably
wanted,
didn't get any views. Probably.
yeah, it was that, and also one, that ray gun project that they wanted to make. they apparently there was rumors that it was going to be hand drawn, and they wanted it to be 150 million. And Apple looked at that and like, we're not paying 150 million dollars for this. And they also took a look at their other movies and like, these are not good. We don't want any of these. You know.
Yeah.
Which,
I mean, Apple's made some good movies recently. They helped finance Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon. They did Napoleon, which is Ridley Scott's new movie. They also the next Joseph Kosinski movie, the director behind Top Gun Maverick, is making a racing movie starring Brad Pitt, which is almost $300 million apparently. But hopefully it's not. Hopefully it's not that high budgeted.
Yeah, they're also making a sort of sequel to the Peanuts movie, and Steve Martino, who directed the first movie, is going to be directing it again.
Is it going to be in theaters or is it a streaming thing?
I don't know. We'll see. It's still too early because they announced development on it back in October. Like, literally around the time Apple dumped Skydance, which was perfect timing. I also read that I also read when it came to Skydance, when they were offering it to other studios, none of them wanted it, and I'm like, why am I not surprised? Like, no one wanted to work with Lasseter, and I think they all looked at the movies and like, these all look like Disney Pixar knockoffs. Who the heck wants them nowadays, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want rip-offs. Like, no one wants to watch rip-offs.
Yeah, John Lasseter. John Lasseter's better working for the Asylum.
He's better off retired. We don't need him anymore. Just go away and don't come back.
Yeah, true. I mean, he's still working in the animation industry because he knows the only job he's better at is working at McDonald's. So.
Yeah. Oh gosh. But yeah. Yeah. When it comes, but yeah. Yeah. I guess we should briefly talk about the box office numbers and.
Oh yeah. This was like a huge movie.
This is a massive movie, and people were really underestimating how big this was gonna get. Like,
I knew it would do well.
I knew it would do well too. I was not expecting it to be this big, though.
I was expecting an over 100 million opening because that's what the other Pixar sequels got. But like 155 million, as in like the third. I guess like people are saying the second biggest animated opening. If you want to count
second.
If you want to count The Lion King 2019, but I guess that was marketed as a live action movie. So I guess as for like animated movies that were marketed as animated movies, this is like number 2, like behind Incredibles 2.
Incredibles 2,
and ahead of the Super Mario Brothers movie, which opened on a Wednesday. So I think if it opened on a Friday like it was supposed to, it would still have that number 2 spot. But its top 3 is still a very solid debut. And I think that I looked at the adjusted for inflation numbers. I think that when you adjust for inflation, it had a bigger opening than Toy Story 4, which is a very good sign.
Yeah, that is a very, very good sign. And it was definitely a relief to see because when it comes, I think people talk about the 3 Pixar films, and let's be honest, Soul is the only one that probably should have been released on Disney Plus because that came out around Christmas time of 2020. The vaccine was still not readily available. It was still a hectic time. I don't know how well that movie would have done in theaters, but
yeah, I think that in my opinion, if I was like in charge of it, I would say release it in theaters for like a month, because I think like Universal released Cruise: A New Age like in theaters and released it on VOD in December for like Christmas for all families to watch. And I would have done the same method as that. Release in theaters like for a month, and have it available on digital like Christmas Day for the whole family to watch. So it's for everyone that doesn't feel comfortable going to the movies at that time.
Yeah. And then Luca came out the next summer, and there were still worries about it. And I was like,
still could have gotten a release though, because theaters. I think around that time,
release. But I was like, okay, I can kind of see it. When Turning Red happened, I was like, and that movie came out, I'm like, there was no excuse not putting that in theaters.
Yeah, they overestimated the Omicron variant, and like, but this was like at a time when like, the recent Spider-Man movie made $1 bajillion. The Batman was in theaters, and family movies usually like are pretty much like the safest bets for like in terms of like like the movie going experience, like especially post pandemic, because I think most adults like are pretty conscious about ticket prices and that kind of thing. So
Yeah, 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 and I really feel like when it came to I also would not be surprised when it came to the release of those three movies. They really wanted to profit on streaming, which I'm just gonna go out there and say this: I have really grown to loathe streaming lately. Not because of its convenience. I do like the convenience of watching movies at home when you're not supposed when you can't access them, but it's mainly because I don't like the idea that new movies just pop up on your TV and you just watch them from home, because I got to see a handful of animated movies that were initially streaming exclusives in theaters this decade. There's five in particular I can think of that I saw in theaters that were exceptional experiences, and that was Soul, Luca, Turning Red, Wolfwalkers, and Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. And
I did see
watching
that one last. I saw that one too. It's Pinocchio in
Yeah,
theaters.
and
Yeah.
watching all those movies in theaters, it hits so much differently when you watch it in a movie theater in that environment than you do watching it on your couch. Like there's just something so there's just like an aura that is so much different than it is at home. Like I feel when I'm at the cinema, I'm genuinely transfixed and transferred into a new world. Like going to the cinema is like going to church for me. I'm not really that religious, but that's
Hmm.
literally like the kind of visceral experience I get from going to a movie theater, and I just do not get that when I simply watch it at home. I still enjoy the movies, and I'll still have experiences watching them through my TV, because I think I have a pretty good TV and a good sound system, but it's just not the same as it is watching it on a much larger screen with the best sound system in the world. Like I remember when I saw Soul, and you see the scene where Joe is in the great beyond, and you hear that sound of the bug zapper, and when all the souls, and I heard behind me just this interesting bug zapper sound that I have never caught in my when watching the movie at home, and I was like, oh my god, this is exactly why I want to see movies in theaters, because I can pick up on little things that I will not get to experience if I just watch it on my couch with the equipment I have.
Yeah, that's
And
unfortunately something that I think a lot of audiences don't really recognize that stuff. Like remember like last year like Dune Part 2 was like probably my most anticipated movie this year, and like I think my one of my dad's like friends like who was asked about it said, "Oh, okay, I'll watch it on HBO Max." And I'm like, "Dog, that movie is made for the big screen. What are you doing?"
it is like I feel like I've told myself this. I said if there is an animated movie that was initially a streaming film and it gets a theatrical release, I'm gonna see it no matter what. I'm obviously not gonna see some animated movies that I don't. I'm obviously not gonna see the animated movies I didn't like in theaters. Like there's several I'm never gonna revisit again. But yeah, watching animated films or just watching any movie on the big screen, it's gonna hit so much harder, and it's just such a much different and visceral experience than I do watch it at home. Like it really is such an enrapturous environment, and yeah, I really really have just grown to despise watching movies at home nowadays, especially Netflix releases, because it doesn't hit the same. And also, it just makes me think that every time a new streaming film comes out, it's just going to get overshadowed by the theatrical movie. Now, that's obviously not the case with some movies. I mean, Nimona was a bigger movie than Ruby Gillman was, but um,
And
yeah, like
Leo was a bigger movie than Wish was.
I'm gonna be, which still astonishes me. I actually hated Leo, but I'm not gonna get into it because I don't want to talk about that movie because it really annoys me when I talk about it because I just don't like it at all. But
Mhm.
uh, yeah, like I don't know if anyone knows this, but there was another animated movie that came out this weekend. It's called Ultraman Rising. I saw it yesterday, and it's a great movie, but releasing it on the same day as Inside Out 2 was a massive mistake, because I know for a fact that even though Ultraman Rising is a great movie, Inside Out 2 was going to be a much bigger movie. And obviously, and also I think Inside Out 2 is a bit better of a film. and like there was just no way it was going to compete with it, you know. And I do not understand why Netflix wanted to do that, except they thought that they could repeat the same magic that they did with Leo and Wish, and I think they really made a grave miscalculation with it. And also when watching Ultraman Rising, I remember watching this animation and being blown away, and I was a bit blown away by it, and I kept thinking to myself, man, imagine seeing this animation from ILM on the big screen. Like, that would have been something else, you know?
Yeah, I mean that whole like mindset of just like watching movies on streaming has basically kind of infected the minds of like the general public though. So like we're like if it's not like a big event movie like an Avengers or a Top Gun Maverick or an Oppenheimer or Barbie, people are just like watch it at home. It'll be on streaming in like a couple weeks. And it's like
Yeah.
it devalues the art of movies though because like movies like were once like the only art form you could only experience on the big screen though. You could watch them on TV like a year or two later, or a DVD you would find 6 months afterwards. But like the theater was the only place you could watch them for like a very long time, and that's just gone away now. And now they've just been like made less special by these big corporations who are looking to copy Netflix's success.
Yeah, and even then, I think Netflix's model is really flawed. Like, I'm pretty certain you saw this like a few weeks ago that Sarandos did an interview talking about why they don't want to capitalize on theatrical events, and then he was talking about, oh, my son is an editor. He watched Lawrence of Arabia for the first time on his phone, and I'm like, you really think that's a flex, dude?
I hope David Lynch heard those words that he watched a movie on his fucking telephone.
I the idea to even watch an epic like Lawrence of Arabia on your smartphone. I mean, that is a movie that was made in like this amazing Super Panavision, and
Yeah,
how
I
do you
know.
have that kind of mindset? Seriously.
Yeah, I know that like my friend, I have a friend like who has his negative thoughts on like the theater experience, mostly because of just like the chit chatter of everything like that, and like the annoying people that go there. But like I guess my response to that, there's also like a really good part of like the Patrick Willems like who is killing cinema video. He was talking about why he thinks the theater experience is important, in terms of like watching movies because at home you control how you're watching the movie, whereas when you're in the theater, you have to show up on time, and that you have to
Mm-hmm.
basically silence your phone and everything like that, and pay attention only to the movie. You can't like you don't pause it or just walk outside or something like that and do something else. It's you are focusing on the movie basically, so it's like it's a priority. It's not just something that you throw on in as background noise.
Yeah, exactly. Like when I go into the movie, I'm really wanting to commit to being enveloped in this world. I'm not actually trying to. I don't want to, be. I want to escape into the world of the movie, and I want to be laser focused on it. When you go into a theater, that's exactly what the filmmaker wants you to do. Because the whole point of cinema, Roger Ebert said it best, the whole point of cinema is to understand empathy. He thought that the point of civilization is to empathize with other people, and he called cinema a machine that generates empathy.
Hmm.
And it's an excellent, excellent way of looking at films, because films are essentially analyzing people. What do they do? What are their lives like? How are they like us, essentially? And I really, really love that with I really, really love that when I go to the movie theaters, because it's just such an enrapturous world to go into when you go into a film and you see what they do and the characters they bring to life and all that and whatnot, because you're taken into new places that can never be seen before, and you're given such an incredible experience doing so. You're in this huge auditorium with a dark screen, the lights go out, and then you're not on planet Earth sitting in a place in
Not just
in a
inside your
chair in
house,
a
like
theater.
yeah, or like you're out in
You're
your
in
living room or something like that.
you're not in like when you're watching in a theater, you are transported into the movie. Whereas when you watch a movie at home, you're still experienced with a movie, but you're experiencing a movie in your house essentially. It's just not the same. And
Yeah.
I like having the convenience of watching movies at home. I love wanting to watch movies over and over again.
Like
But
I love collecting Blu-rays and 4K
mm-hmm.
copies of like movies I really love, but I will still always get a chance to see it in the theater if I can, though.
Yeah. And that's why when Pixar re-released the 3 Disney Plus movies in theaters this year, even though I own all 3 movies, like I own Soul, I own Luca and Turning Red, and I'm like, and I knew them front to back, I was like, I'm not passing up this opportunity to watch them on the big screen. That is what these films were made for. I want to bathe in these colors. I want to watch these character stories. I want to feel their emotions. I just want to lose myself in these worlds all over again. I want to experience Joe, you know, going to the youth seminar and helping 22 find her spark. I want to see Luca go to the human village with Alberto and try to win the Vespa with Julia. I want to see May having fun as the Red Panda with her friends trying to go to a Four Town concert, you know?
Yeah,
These are
the best
stories that are
screenings
just
are the best screenings are like ones where like no one's really around though. You've got to be kind of, sometimes if you want to be wise about which movies you want to see, like make sure it's like a
mm-hmm,
showtime like in an afternoon weekend where no one's going to be around really, and maybe a few adults in the back, but they're not going to be loud or annoying or something like that. And thankfully,
mm-hmm.
my Inside Out 2 screening, despite being packed, wasn't that bad. There were some there were some pretty loud kids at the beginning, but like it soured down eventually though. They were really loud during the previews, but thankfully like it wasn't a bad experience throughout most of it. So
Yeah.
that's always my main fear
Yeah.
going into movies in the theater though. It's just like people though, lacking common sense or etiquette.
Yeah, I really don't like that too. I remember I hate it when I go to a movie and it's the worst experience ever. I remember when I went to see the Garfield movie and that was one of the worst screenings I've attended because it was miserable. Like the lights were on, there was a bunch of screaming kids, the parents were so inconsiderate, they were on their phones constantly. It was hell. It was absolute hell. I was like,
Yeah, I that's why I always recommend going to independent theaters too. I was actually at Cannes this year, for a few days.
"Oh, that's cool."
Yeah, so I got to see some movies there, and they had some of the best audiences there because like everyone was just quiet. They laughed when they were supposed to laugh. If they needed a cough, they can just cough. But like they didn't like they weren't like or like on their phones or TikTok or whatever. They just watch the movie as you're supposed to when you're at the
Yeah.
theater.
I kind of wish I had like one of those critic screening things so I can go into early critic presses and just be in a theater with them and just watch the movie as is in a quiet theater because that's just like what I want to experience. But there is also just something fun about watching it with a crowd because, like I said, watching Inside Out 2, and my crowd when they saw Inside Out 2 was really calm and professional. It was mostly adults, which
Hmm,
was
interesting.
um interesting. And yeah, everyone was just cracking up at the hilarious jokes, like the running gags and Bloofy, and also Anger just being this big Anger just wanting to punch people and whatnot, and also that whole scene where they go into Imagination Land and they go into the Pillow Fortress and they find it being turned into like an animation studio where they, make like anxious thoughts for
For
anxiety and
Riley.
Riley, and it basically has this huge homage to 1984, both the book and the Apple commercial, which was so funny.
Hmm.
Um, like I like that, like you see the chair being thrown at the screen, which was an homage to the Apple commercial. Which, fun fact, that was actually directed by Ridley Scott, believe it or
Hmm,
not,
interesting.
which makes
But
sense. It definitely has Blade Runner vibes to it.
yeah, but yeah, like this, like this is like the biggest opening for a movie since Barbie last year, and we went
Yeah,
through all that time without like people going to a movie. I think this is probably the first Pixar movie a lot of people have seen in the theater since Toy Story 4, which is weird to think because that's almost 5 years ago.
yeah,
But
that
um,
that is crazy. Because I actually did see Onward in theaters. I saw it in an early screening
I saw
before,
that too.
you know,
Yeah,
Yeah, I saw it in an early screening before shit hit the fan. But um,
I was
yeah,
really
it is
upset when
fascinating.
Soul didn't hit theaters when it was supposed to, and also
Same.
Luca, and especially Turning Red because at that time I was like, I'm tired of this. Please release it.
I was too. When Turning Red came up, I was going to my parents' house to check on something, and I pull up my phone, I see this news, and I'm like, "Are you kidding me? I wanted to see this in theaters." Now I don't have to rant about it anymore because I had seen him in theaters. So yeah, I got to see four great Pixar movies this year in theaters, so I'm not
Yeah.
complaining.
Yeah, I mean, like it's funny because it's like funny because like I remember like most of my film class, like the spring trimester before we were getting out, is mostly just like movie theaters are dying, no one's going to the movies anymore, and it's like for ones like only it's only like for every seven flops we get one major hit. It's basically how theaters
Yeah,
are going nowadays. We had almost every movie that came out in May flopped, like that Fall Guy movie flopped, Furiosa was a huge flop. Um, like
yeah.
almost yeah, almost it's basically like 20 summer of 2023 again. Like there for every few movies that do well, there's like 12 other movies that flop. So because
Yeah,
like
there's a few movies that flopped, and there's not a. I mean, even when it comes to family movies this summer that are going released to theaters, I can't really imagine anything being bigger than this. Like, I mean,
Despicable Me
next month we have,
4.
which I don't know if that's going to be as big a hit as Illumination thinks it is.
I mean, kids
We'll
love
see.
those minions, so I don't know.
Kids love those minions, yeah, but we'll
I
see
don't think
whether
it's
or
gonna.
not
I don't think
parents
it's
are.
gonna open as big as this though, because like if they
No,
haven't
no.
opened bigger than if they haven't opened bigger yet, like then they're probably not. It's probably not gonna break as much. I think this will be the bigger hit overall at like
Yeah,
global
that bigger
box
hit
office
because
too.
after that you got Harold and the Purple Crayon, which is going to be a that's going to be a massive flop critically and commercially. It
Really,
looks.
I thought it was gonna make Harold and the Purple Crayon $1,000,000 the box office or something. I don't know.
I remember I saw that trailer and I was like, oh jeez, poor Carlos Saldana. This looks like what Monster Trucks was for Chris Wedge. I hope he gets to do an animated film at Annapurna, much like what Wedge is doing, because I don't like it whenever a director gets to do like a film that's very obviously exec meddled and you feel like it's going to take down their careers. Because I don't like seeing films end directors' careers if these are good directors and something went horribly wrong in production and there's like or they're working from very bad source material you want them to do well, you want them to recover.
It
But
feels like it looks like a movie
sometimes
that was made in the 2000s actually.
it really does, yeah.
Like those like the
I mean
Shaggy Dog or Cat in the Hat movies. They're just like those shitty
Yeah.
movies they
I mean,
make
we're
based
still
off
getting
children's
those a
books.
lot. Yeah, I mean, we're still getting a lot of them nowadays. Like um you got Clifford, you got Lyle Crocodile,
Oh yeah,
like seriously, is it really that hard to copy Paddington? Can we have more movies like Paddington,
yeah.
please?
Yeah, Paddington's a good
I love the
example of
Paddington
like,
movies.
yeah. That's the thing. Everybody loves the Paddington movies. They even joked about
Yeah.
that in that Nick Cage movie. But I mean, yeah, that's like a good example of like a character from like a graphic comic
A
book,
children's book
children's
that
book. Yeah, that's like certain that's has like an animated character in the real world that's like done well.
it's
That's
done
not done
properly
for
because I can't
that's
think.
not done for cheap pop culture references. It's not made by Hollywood. That's the reason why
Yeah,
why
it's
they don't
not made by
suck.
Hollywood. Yeah, it's made by people who actually respect and care for the source material, not like let's just do this because it's a property and we can, squeeze out of it. We can make another Garfield. We can make another Alvin and the Chipmunks or the Smurfs. Like I still remember. Oh gosh, I still have scars about Alvin and the Chipmunks. My sister dragged me to see Chipwrecked. I had to see the three movies in theaters. Chipwrecked was my breaking point. That was the worst. That's one of the worst movies I've ever seen. It's easily the
Oh
worst movie I've
yeah,
seen in a theater.
director of
Ugh.
Kung Fu Panda 4.
Yeah.
um,
uh,
yeah, but
but
I mean, like,
uh
I definitely have my negatives with the theater experience. I don't want it to go away because the thing is, people like
mhm.
have been kind of doom posting about theaters dying. I told you this, but like my college professor predicted that theaters will like be specialized in the next 10 years. Like they'll exist for like film festivals and red carpet premieres, but like that'll be it.
I don't think that'll happen because let's be honest, film theaters have survived more than that. They I remember like the 50s was the first real time where theaters were like people thought theaters were going to go extinct in the 50s when TV was on the rise, and then theaters were trying to, and films were, and studios were trying to do a lot of gimmicks that exploited this, and most of them were not good. You had like smell-o-vision in 3D, though we had the best one, which was widescreen, which was easily the most beneficial development that came out of that trend. And then obviously film survived. It survived the rise of television. It survived the rise of VHS tapes. It's gonna survive streaming.
It's just like the only thing is there's even more competition now, which is going to be tougher. Not only does it have streaming, it has social media, video games, and yeah, it's TV again, like you said. So
yeah, but I think that honestly, I think the streaming bubble is going to be bursting more before theaters do. Like, the streaming bubble will burst. It probably could go out of fashion quicker than theaters might, honestly, because I don't know. This model's not going to be sustainable forever. There's only there's not much money in it. Let's be completely real. And even then, when you look at it, people want to see movies in theaters because, yeah, there's something much more different than watching a movie in theater than it is seeing it on your TV screen. Because really, how much longer can Netflix keep up this model before they start to realize that it's very severely cracked? There's a lot of cracks in this model. Like, you can't you can't make much money from it.
Sustain making $200 million cheap B movie action things that need 100 million more subscribers to break even.
And also, I just don't understand why they don't release these movies on home video. Well, I know why they do, because if they do, people will stop subscribing to their service. But still, you think that opening a home video division would still get them money. It's basically a license to print money. Just release your movies on digital, or release your movies on Blu-ray or DVD. I mean,
at least Amazon does that.
Movies. Yeah, at least Amazon does that because they have MGM. But I don't understand why Netflix doesn't do that. There's plenty of movies from them I want to own Blu-rays for them, like Klaus and
Does Nimona have a Blu-ray?
Boy. Nimona, yeah, maybe Nimona will have it. I mean, Annapurna has deals with other studios. I can.
Pinocchio thankfully has a Netflix or has a Criterion release.
So. Yeah, bless the Criterion collection. I mean, it might happen. I mean, G-Kid's got the rights to Arcane, which was a huge development, so it's very possible that we might get to see more Netflix movies on Blu-ray. I mean, I want to own a lot of animated Netflix movies on Blu-ray because there's plenty I want to add to my collection. Like I said, like Nimona is probably the biggest one I want to have because I do own the 4K of Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. But
yeah, me too. I know that like there was that recent Netflix movie Hitman that came out, which like I heard good things about it, but like I'm not as interested because I know I can only just watch it at home though. Because like I'd rather drive to a theater to see it because like it feels more special. Yeah, even though
it's a Richard Linklater movie, I'd rather see the new Richard Linklater film in theaters and not like, oh hey, it's on Netflix, you can pop it up. I'm like,
it's not as special though. It's like boring now.
When a movie comes out on Netflix, it's not special. It's just like for me, it's just like counting down the days. Like, oh, I get to see it. Okay. Whereas if it's in theaters, I'm like, oh my god, it's coming out. I get to go to the theater to see it. This is exciting.
Yeah. It's just like people are like really strapped for cash right now. Like, I guess they'd rather pay like $7 a month for like probably like $50 a month for like several streaming services than like pay $100 to take a family to the movies. It's like, my Inside Out 2 ticket cost $19.
Jeez, yeah. I
know it was a Dolby screening, but still, like, that's still like ludicrous. Like, for that, I guess if I was like an executive, I would say $12, $13, $14 maybe at most, but like 19.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 19. That's crazy. But yeah, getting back to the Inside Out 2 stuff, I'm really happy that this has actually become a huge hit because not just because it's a great movie, and I think great movies deserve to make money, but also, this is something Pixar needed, They needed a true hit. Yeah, they needed a true hit. And I think it's going to allow them the money to keep making more original stuff, because that's obviously where a lot of this money is coming from. They're going to be using this to pump their resources into making more original movies, essentially. Like,
and also originals that could also get sequels, too, that warrant a continuation that are liked enough.
exactly. Like
Like we
when it
wouldn't
comes
have
to
an
this
Inside
decade,
Out 2 if they just only made sequels throughout the 2010s. So
exactly. And honestly, when it comes to this decade, I could see Luca and Turning Red getting sequels if they wanted to. Probably,
the only
I don't
problem
want
is
them
they were
right
on
away,
streaming
but
though, so that
yeah.
probably it probably doesn't really convince people to go out to the theater to see it.
I'm certain it will because those movies were big hits streaming wise. So, um, but when it comes to this movie's big hit, it is really nice to see, and I'm really glad it surpassed all expectations. It's already made back its budget in a few days, which is huge. I mean, it made more money than Wish did throughout its entire run in just
Same as
3 days,
Lightyear,
and Lightyear too. Yeah.
and also passed Elemental's entire domestic run in its first 3 days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like a
And
monster hit for
it
them.
it's a monster hit. Like I knew this was going to be big, but I was not expecting it to be this big. But the fact that it is this big is definitely a relief to see. And I'm not saying that because I'm going to be worried they're going to make me making more sequels. I don't think they're going to learn the lesson. We need more sequels out of this. I think they're going to be learning the lesson that okay, we can make sequels every once in a while to movies that people really want, and also we can use those resources to pump that into more original stuff. Like obviously with the Bluefy stuff, I think that might convince them to put more like 2D experimentation in their movies because they set up this pipeline for the film for Win or Lose, the show on Disney Plus that I'm very eager to see once it comes out. And in fact, because they set it up for Win or Lose, they realized this would be a cool idea if we could use it for Inside Out 2, and because Win or Lose got pushed back, it allowed Inside Out 2 to come in and be the first real simple use of showcase to show that alongside the Spark shorts because we're starting to see a lot more stop motion experimentation and hand drawn animation experimentation, which we'll eventually get to see more of in the movies, and that's really cool to see. Essentially, not just because it's cool experimentation, but also again you see newer voices being passed on the torch and doing more with this medium than just photorealistic imagery, like you said. Because I think the first time, I know you were talking about the fact that seeing that abstract scene was really cool, and I think that's a good point because the same year Inside Out came out was the same year Good Dinosaur came out, and I remember everyone was talking about how good the photorealistic backgrounds were, but they thought that the character animation was so cartoony it just clashed with it, essentially.
Yeah, that's the one everyone talks about because like, ooh, it's almost like live action in the background, but like you have all these like cartoony ass looking dinosaurs, and it's like this is lame.
Yeah. It was definitely where I think it was the first moment where the live action, the photorealistic elements was just it hit their peak, and audience was like, okay, we want to see more animation esque stuff, and I guess we're obviously seeing more of that, and I think Pixar's going to lean more into that because obviously the characters are becoming a lot more cartoonier lately. Like you look at this decade
That's good.
alone, apart from Soul. I mean, Soul had photorealistic characters and Lightyear photorealistic, but Soul used half and half because you also have the characters in
The
the
cartoony
cartoon
segments
segments,
in the Soul
Soul
World.
World, yeah, and the experiment, especially when you saw and also you had like the abstract Picasso like line work and whatnot. It's incredible stuff. So yeah, I do think.
Oh yeah,
So yeah, and it's like and again, Luca and Turning Red were leaning a lot more into anime influences. Like Luca was very much Ghibli. Turning Red had a lot of influence from stuff like Sailor Moon and whatnot, and there's also some Ghibli influences in there. I saw a lot of Isao Takahata, particularly in the scene where May is in the spirit realm in the bamboo forest. That is a very pure Takahata sequence. It reminded me a lot of Kaguya. Um,
makes sense. Yeah.
but yeah,
Um,
when it comes to this movie, I do think Pixar's going to learn the right lessons from this movie, and I'm glad it's going to be a hit from it's both a critical and commercial hit for them because yes, they needed it. I'm glad they are getting it. I'm glad this movie is actually really winning over a lot of people, and yeah, it just makes me very more confident for what they're going to be making next. Like obviously we have Elio coming out next year, and then in a few months we're going to hear what else they're cooking at D23. We're going to hear their upcoming projects afterwards, and I'm very excited to hear more.
I think it also, yeah, I think like it also shows like the first movie is very well liked too. It's
Yes.
very popular with
Yeah.
audiences. Because like I guess so. I remember like I was talking with a friend earlier this year, and I told him I predicted that Inside Out 2 would be the biggest hit this year, And the reason I predicted that is because it's the least likely to fail. It's not R rated. It's not it's like the first movie was a big hit. Pixar sequels make tons of money. So like there's the least likely to lose with
Yeah,
it.
and also it's still a
So
fresh franchise too. I mean,
yeah, it hasn't
one thing I'll give,
it's not like Toy Story 5 where like people are like, I don't
yeah,
know.
like, or even like when you look at other franchises that have come out, like I said before, if you get to movie 4, you really need to justify your own. You really need to justify if it can keep going, because most of the time film franchises can't. Because I'm someone in the minority that thought Shrek Forever After didn't work at all, and I didn't think Hotel Transylvania 4 didn't work, and then you had Continental Drift, the fourth Ice Age movie, which was a complete derailment. And I think the big problem
Yeah.
is that some franchises are what I call toothpaste franchises. Essentially, by that I mean
Hmm.
toothpaste on a conveyor belt. They just keep pumping them out and pumping them out like toothpaste, and like you keep making franchises year after year after year. People are gonna get tired of that after a while because you're like, oh, it's another one, okay. Which is kind of why I'm a little skeptical on whether or not Despicable Me 4 is going to be a big hit. Because, yeah, it has those big minions, but they've been making movies for the past 2 to 3 years. And since 2010, and yeah, even though that last one made $900 million, I think I think it could finally show that the brakes are starting to come off. And also, I I don't really remember that movie all that well, and I remember seeing it. The only thing I really, honestly, the funniest part about that movie wasn't even in the damn movie, and that was the Gentle Minions meme. That was
Yeah.
funnier than the actual movie itself.
I actually did see that in theaters because like it was just like it was just like my mom was just like dropping me off somewhere, and I was like, what do I do now? I guess fine, I guess I'll see it. It was just like, okay. I mean, it wasn't a bad experience. It was just like
No, it wasn't a bad
it
experience. It was
existed.
fine. It was fine. I gave it a 6, but
I give it a
it's
5. Existed.
I it, like, yeah, yeah, it's a movie that exists. Like, it's fine. I didn't hate it.
It was better than the
It's
first
not a
one, I
movie I'd
guess,
watch
but
again. It
like
Yeah, it's better than the first one.
that's not saying
It's
much.
absolutely better for the first, but that is not saying much. Yeah. Whereas this is a franchise that the first movie was one of the freshest animated films ever made. It was ripe for a sequel. They did it properly. And I can see people, and this is one I think I could see people wanting to do more of. If they made an Inside Out 3, I'd be on board with it. And I think
Me
most
too.
people would be on board with it because
This is one
people
of the few
loved.
Pixar sequels I actually wouldn't mind a sequel.
Yeah, yeah. And um like when you make a sequel nowadays, like I've previously stated, you really need to. I feel like there's not many animated sequels that are coming out that I'm overly hyped to see. There's a few I can name that I'm actually looking forward to. I'm looking forward to Beyond the Spider-Verse, much like everyone else. I'm also looking
Hmm.
forward to Bad Guys 2, Zootopia 2, and Mutant Mayhem 2. But other sequels, I are take it and leave it, or I'm like, why are they making another one? Like like a big sequel, I'm not looking forward to. Like one sequel I'm really not looking forward to is there's another SpongeBob movie coming out next year that
Oh
I'm like,
yeah.
I don't want another
I like the
one.
first. I like. I
And
mean, the first one I think is an absolute masterpiece. Second one I actually really like. Third one
I like the second
garbage.
one. I like the second one a lot. I think that one might be my favorite. The third one I didn't care for at all,
Third one
and
was ass.
it wasn't good. But
The fourth
yeah,
one's probably
and
going to
then
be
you
even
have,
worse, honestly.
we'll see, and then you have, like, and as far as other sequels go, Moana 2 comes out in November, and
Not
still
excited for that.
cautiously, I'm still very cautious about that, knowing the whole streaming to film thing. We'll see how it turns out. I still need to see more trailers to be convinced if it will work.
I also don't like most. I said I'm lukewarm on Pixar sequels. I'm even more negative towards Disney animation sequels. I
Mm.
guess The Rescuers Down Under is decent. I haven't seen Fantasia 2000. I've
Fantasia
heard,
2000 is pretty great.
yeah, I've heard that one's good, but like Ralph Breaks the Internet, Frozen 2. I don't like those movies very much, but
That's fair. I like both of them. I'll defend them, but I can totally see why some people don't like them. But yeah, I do agree. Disney animation can be very iffy with their sequels, and I'm very skeptical. And like I said, I'm very cautious about Moana 2 because I don't know how it'll turn out. I'm more excited for Zootopia 2 than I am Moana 2 because I feel like Zootopia is a lot more ripe for a sequel than Moana is.
there's probably more to do with
And
that because like Moana 2 looks like the same movie basically. Like because like what other story are you gonna tell though? It's not like How to Train Your Dragon where like you still have stuff to explore that you haven't already.
yeah, like there was a lot of lore in Dragon, and there's not, and that's not to say Moana doesn't have lore. There's obviously some cool lore there. I'm curious. I don't know what they're gonna do with it. And again, the fact that it was the fact it was a streaming show getting converted into a movie has me thinking: are they gonna edit it well enough to the point where I'm gonna forget it was ever a streaming movie? Because Pixar did that with Toy Story 2, because that was initially a direct to DVD film, and that got a theatrical release. And nowadays, if people didn't know that was going to be directed video, people would have been like, you would have been like, wow, this is I would have never known that because this is such a great movie. I even told my dad that, and my dad loves Toy Story 2, and he was like, wow, I didn't know this was going to be made just for DVD.
Pixar fought to
And
get that a theatrical release and for it to be an actual movie, that a proper sequel basically.
yeah, they thought it was good enough for theaters, and they were right to make the call,
And they made
honestly.
it in like 9 months, right?
Yeah, they completely scrapped the whole thing when they realized it wasn't working, and started over in January and of '99 and basically reworked the story and just reanimated the whole movie in 9 months, which is insane to think about nowadays because
I hope
that
they
feels
didn't
like
go
a
through a
recipe
ton
for
of
this.
crunch time.
Well, oh, people did. It was pretty hectic. It was a pretty hectic production from what I have read and what people have said. There was one time where an animator was so overworked and tired that he forgot to take their kid to the daycare, left him in the car when they went into the building, and then he had a panic. He was like, "Oh my god, I left my kid in a hot car." And they luckily got him out before the worst happened, but it was like a point where they realized, "Oh my god, we are really overworking our staff to get this movie," and they wanted to make sure that that would never happen again. But even despite all that hell that Toy Story 2 went through, the fact that the movie ended up being the masterpiece that it was really just goes to show you just how amazing a studio this company is and how ingenious and smart its employees are. Like, like, yeah. And I've even read the original drafts of Toy Story 2 before it got rewritten. They totally made the right call because I don't know if you know this. Like, Jessie was supposed to be like a character called Senorita Cactus or something like that,
Mm,
and she would have been a villain, much like Stinky Pete. Like the only character that would have gone home from from Al's apartment was actually Bullseye, and yet they reworked Senorita Cactus into Jessie because they thought they needed a much more stronger female character, and it really worked because it helped give Woody kind of like a little sister character, you know.
yeah.
Um, I'm glad that they didn't make Jessie his new love interest. Like, I like that Woody looks at her almost like a sister, almost, and it's a really cute relationship.
I also would have been too obvious too. I like the whole Buzz, Jesse like implications towards the end.
Yeah, Buzz going like Jessie going for Buzz is really sweet, and also you get to see that explored a bit more in the third movie, which was really cute. Yeah, I really do like that when it came to Jessie, they made her more like a sister character to Woody, and rather more of a love interest to Buzz. That was a very smart and clever move, and and it was a good subversion of type. I really liked that. It wasn't contrived in any way.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and yeah, and I look back on all their previous movies, and yeah, like a lot of the Pixar movies, people don't realize had really troubled production. Some of them were very smooth, but there were some that are very troubled that people don't talk about often. Like like the one that everyone really adores, but no one talks about how chaotic the production was. Much like Toy Story 2, is Ratatouille, because that movie got completely reworked in 2 years.
The
Like,
movie's so good you don't even notice it.
yeah, exactly. I love it when the like I can now that I've seen as many movies as I have and have picked up on production problems through all the research I've done. It is so easy to tell whenever a movie has had a troubled production because it is so evident in the final product. But you know when your movie is so good that when you watch the final movie and you're like, man, if you didn't tell me this thing had a troubled production, I would never have guessed. And that is one of those movies where I watched it and I'm like, I never knew that this had a different director and wasn't working at all, you know?
It feels like a Brad Bird movie from the ground up.
It really does. It
It's
really
one of the most
does. Which is,
maturely written Pixar movies, which is why I think it's still one of their best.
yeah, it's definitely one of Pixar's most mature films. I think, if I had to pick Pixar's most mature films, I'd probably say Ratatouille, Wall-E, Soul, maybe now this. This is definitely a very mature movie. But I think it's really Ratatouille, Wall-E, and Soul are probably their most mature, their most adult films that I've seen. The ones that I think are the most and daring and complex filmmaking I've seen, and the ones that tackle the most challenging themes and most sophisticated writing that you would not see in a family movie. And even Incredibles has a lot of that too, with, you know, the conflicts that superheroes go through essentially, and the midlife
Mm-hmm.
crisis that Bob has, and his, you know, relationship with Helen. Like, I like the whole thing when, like, I also kind of like the idea that when like I also kind of like the idea that Helen is catching on to Bob's whole thing. It's not just the fact he's being a superhero, he thinks he's having an affair as
Oh
well, which is
yeah,
something that you wouldn't see. Like when he catches him with like when he catches her with Mirage after she frees him, when she tells him that Helen and Dash and Violet have survived the plane crash, and he hugs her, and then Helen just shows up, and she's like, "Oh my god, are you having an affair?" And she's like,
yeah.
and
She doesn't say
Bob's like,
anything
"He was
though, but
trying
that's
to
the best
help me."
part.
No, that's what I was doing.
Yeah, they don't. I think that was even implied. Like there was a really good video by the Unlucky Tug that was talking about that too when he was discussing the first movie. And yeah, like they don't. You kind of even. It's kind of even implied in that scene when he's like back from like the just going out with Frozone, like when he like is saving people from a burning building. Like there's the implication there that she has the idea that maybe he's like cheating on her.
Yeah, like, and also the idea that I really love that argument scene that they have together. It's a very well written argument
Apparently, based on
because
one of Brad Bird's own like arguments he had with his own wife.
yeah, and yeah, and I like that neither, like, both of them are pretty rational in their feelings. Like Helen is frustrated because she feels like Bob isn't, you know, being there for his family, is making it more about himself, and Bob is more frustrated because he thinks that, you know, he's not allowing the family's not being allowed to see their full potential, and they feel like they're being put into a box essentially because of what's been going on around them. Like, I think of that one scene where, like, I think a part of that argument is when they were talking about Dash and how he got sent to the principal's office, and like Helen is wanting to make it about Dash as a troublemaker. What are we gonna do with him? And Bob is like, well, let him go out for sports. That's what he wants to do. And he's like, we know we can't make him go out for sports because you know he's exceptionally fast. And he's like, this is not about you. We're not going back to the old glory days, essentially.
He's forced to show up to like his third grade graduation. He's like he's graduating from the third to the fourth grade. They're finding new ways to celebrate mediocrity.
Yeah. It's a ceremony. It's psychotic.
Yeah.
Just, uh,
So how would you rank the sequel compared to other Pixar sequels?
I think this is their best. I do think this is their best non-Toy Story sequel, honestly. Um,
I'd say it's the third best Pixar sequel.
I I'd say it's second or third best. I'm still going back and forth between whether or not I like it more than Toy Story 2, but it's up there for me.
I'd say Toy
Toy
Story
Story.
2, 3, then this, and then Monsters University. I like, so I'd probably put that number 4. But
Yeah, that's a. I mean, Monsters University is a good pick. I really like Monsters University. I'm really glad people are starting to warm up to that movie because, yeah, like I said, it definitely got a lot more lukewarm reaction back then, and now it's. I think now being out of college and looking at it, it's. I think when a lot more Gen Z are going to college and rewatching it, they're like, "Wow, this is a lot more sophisticated than we realized." Because yeah, that ending where Mike and Sully don't get what they want, and yet they're not essentially failures. And when Hardscrabble goes up to them and said, "You surprised me,"
Yeah, that was a good
and
scene
even though
too.
they got, it's a great scene and it's a great message for kids because, like, I like the idea that you should show kids that characters can get a happy ending, but they don't have to get what they want. They don't have to get what they want essentially because it's a good reflection of reality. Like, yes, Mike and Sully got expelled from the college. They didn't graduate with honors or make it into MI right away, but that doesn't mean they failed exactly. I mean, they pulled off. They got out of the human. They got out of the human world with one of the most craziest stunts they could pull off. They helped get Uzma Kampa into the scare program, and also they got some approval from the dean, even though they got expelled. They surprised her by pulling off that stunt.
Oh, for sure. It's funny because I used to hate that movie at one point, probably because of a certain reviewer, Doug Walker. But like now that I've like rewatched it since then, I've grown to really like it now.
Yeah, I've always liked Monsters University. I've always thought it was a good prequel. Like, definitely not on the levels of. It's definitely not on
Oh
MI's
yeah,
levels, but it's still a really good prequel. I think it continues it very well. I like how it sets up Mike and Sully's conflicts. I like the Ewan McCampa characters quite a bit. I mean, they're pretty fun. I'm always gonna like hearing Peter Sohn's voice in anything. He has such a lovable voice.
yeah.
Um,
I think it was actually thought before that it would have been better if they did a sequel. But if they did that, they would have to like. I think they even said that as to why like they did a prequel instead. Is like they would have to like continue after the ending of Monsters Inc., which is like one of the best endings to any movie ever. I think. Like, how do you
yeah,
like?
it
It'd
really
be
is.
really weird to continue that after that because like it's meant to close after that. I think.
That shot is just perfect. It's a perfect ending. Everyone could agree on that. I mean, and it's also just beautifully animated. Did you know Pete Docter actually animated that last shot in Monsters Inc.?
Oh really?
Yeah, because he was the supervising animator at the studio. Because he was the supervising animator on Toy Story. Also, crazy fact: the logo with Luxo Jr. bouncing on the eye in Pixar, that was also animated by him.
Interesting. Wow. He's probably like you should have been like the big chief creative officer from the ground up, and not that hack John Lasseter.
Yeah, maybe I think it goes to show. I mean, I've looked back on even the movies Lasseter's directed, and I've discovered he really was not the primary voice behind any of his movies. Because Toy Story was more of a group project. Um, Bug's Life was more of Andrew Stanton's vehicle. Toy Story 2 was more Lee Unkrich and Ash Brannon, and also had Andrew Stanton influence. Cars was Jordan Klubian's idea, and Joe Ranft
He
had a
ripped
lot
it
more
off.
influence. He not only not he didn't rip it off, he stole the idea. He completely took credit for it. Like, the one idea that was solely his idea was Cars 2, and well, you all know how that turned out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it really just showed me that I don't think he was really the. Everyone calls him this genius, the heart and soul of Pixar, and I've looked back on it and I'm like, no, he really wasn't. There was a lot more. He took a lot more credit from others that deserve a lot more credit than he did. And,
Even his other movies,
um,
like his non-Toy Story movies, are a lot weaker than their other movies. Like Cars and A Bug's Life. Cars is a fine movie. I wouldn't. It's like not one of like Pixar's best movies. Like you look at
I
Andrew
agree.
Stanton's
It's decent.
work. He had made Finding Nemo, Wally, masterpieces. Honestly, Pete Docter, Monsters Inc., Up, Inside
Up.
Out, Soul. Yeah, I mean
Mm-hmm.
those are way better movies than Bugs Life and Cars. But yeah,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Cars is decent. I do really like A Bug's Life, but yeah, you are completely right. Andrew Stanton's movies are stronger, and Pete Docter's movies are a lot stronger than
and
Lasseter's
Brad
non
Bird
Toy Story
too.
movies. And Brad Bird's, yeah, and Lee Unkrich too, because Toy
Oh
Story 3
yeah,
and
Toy Story
Coco are
3 and
also
Coco.
much stronger than Bug's Life and
That's why I was kind of
Cars.
sad that he left the studio because like I would have liked to see another movie he made, but it's like good that
Yeah.
like he left because he wanted to be with his family. So he
Yeah.
he went by the message of Coco at the end. So that's nice.
Yeah, that was a good message that he had. He went on his own. He went out on his own terms, and that, and I'm not complaining on that. And if Coco is his final film directorial film at Pixar, that is a very good that's a very good film to go out on.
Yeah.
Um, and also, yeah, like I said, there's going to be new, and also still, I mean, I think, and also still, we're in an exciting era. We're going to see some new filmmakers pick up the torch from a lot of these creative geniuses. Like, maybe we'll see Andrew Stanton and Pete Docter direct another movie eventually. And
Stanton's allegedly directing Toy Story 5.
I've heard that. I've heard he might be. I do think he's probably going to be writing it. He's written every single movie except the three, even though he did come up with a story for three. Like the whole thing of Andy going to college was his idea because he based it on his own son, who was going to college at the time. And yeah, I think I can see. But if he is directing Toy Story 5, I would love to see that. But
I
yeah,
just like I remember hearing rumors that Joel Crawford was going to direct Kung Fu Panda 4. Those are kind of debunked, so I'm still like not really as
on
sold on it.
fence.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that I heard there's another director who's going to be directing it. I'm not going to say who it is yet because I could be wrong, but we'll see. We'll see. But when it comes to but yeah, when it comes to the but yeah, I think that we're seeing a new crop of filmmakers at the studio being passed on the baton, and it's a very exciting time. We got would I like to see Pete Docter and Andrew Stanton direct more movies? Yeah, obviously, and I think if they do make another one at the studio, and I think they probably will, I'm gonna go obviously see it. I wouldn't be surprised if Brad Bird returns to the studio, considering that Ray Gun's falling apart at Skydance. It's very possible he's going to walk away entirely and go back to Pixar, which I would be more than happy with. But yeah, but I'm not complaining we're getting new filmmakers at the studio because I want to see new voices at the studio. I mean, Dan Scanlon's making a third movie after Onward. Enrico Casarosa and Domi Shi are following up Luca and Turning Red, and I am super hyped for both of those movies. There's other new filmmakers at the studio who are going to be shining with their directorial debuts. It's an exciting time. We're seeing some new voices. There's some diversity at the company. I do think Pixar is in a really interesting state right now, and I think they're in a good state, and I think we're going to be seeing some more exciting original movies from here.
Yeah, the only fear I heard rumors that like Elio went through some like trouble production apparently.
Yeah,
It
I've heard
got
it had some
delayed.
story trouble.
It got delayed all the way from its like March release this year to next year. Like I even like that's like insane. If you wanted to like lessen your output for the year, you could have just moved Moana 2 to next summer and have Elio come in November. But
Yeah, yeah, that I mean I would have done that too, but I will give Elio this. I know Elio has not had a major recasting because I saw that the actor who's playing him is back in the studio recording lines, so they're not. I don't think this is a good dinosaur situation. I think Adrian Molina is still directing the movie, and I'm glad they're keeping him on the movie because I do not want to see a repeat of.
oh yeah, that's why I was kind of scared
Dinosaur.
because I just thought of this recently. And Inside Out too, similar to the first Inside Out, was like a return to form for Pixar, and but then well, what's their next movie? What was their next movie after Inside Out? Oh, Good Dinosaur. What's their next movie after Inside Out 2? Elio? Oh no! Wait!
Honestly, I'm faithful in Elio. If I don't think Pete Docter was going to kick Adrian Molina off the movie and put a new filmmaker on like Lasseter did, because that was clearly a Lasseter move, and obviously
I think that would make the movie worse though. So
he would make the movie work, but I think Molina's kept on the movie and he was able to work out the problems he did, because I think Pete Docter trusts his filmmakers, unlike what Lasseter did. I mean, Lasseter is still doing it. He did it with luck. With poor Alessandro Carloni, he kicked him off the movie, replaced him one of his Disney cronies. Surprise, surprise, it didn't work. So yeah, I have confidence in Elio. I do think it'll work out in the end. Like, yeah, like if the story rumors are true, we'll see what happens. But I do think it happens. But from what I heard that the movie is solid. I just think that the third act was clunky and they needed to rework that. But hey, they're keeping the filmmaker on, and I'm fairly certain it's probably going to work out. I have confidence in that movie. So,
yeah, it's opening next summer. So hopefully, I'm hoping that the success of this movie will bring more families back to see their next movie. Hopefully,
Yeah, absolutely. I'm for sure certain it will. I think because this movie's a massive hit, it'll show Pixar's back. I think Elemental was the seeds that really sewed it into place that yeah, Pixar's back because that became a sleeper hit and
it wasn't like a
people went to
monster
see
hit, but
it.
like I think it broke
It wasn't a
even in its
monster hit,
theatrical
but
run.
it wasn't a monster hit, yeah, but it was a moderate hit. And I think, like I said, it did set the seeds for Inside Out 2. So yeah, like I said, I do have confidence in Pixar and I do have faith in Elio, and I'm very excited to see what movies they come up with next. But yeah, as far as Inside Out 2 goes, yeah, great movie. I'm really happy it turned out the way it did. I'm glad it's a hit. And obviously, I really recommend it. I think it's a great movie. And if you haven't seen it yet, obviously we both recommend you do so. It's phenomenal.
It's really good. I would say that I do not think it's as good as the first, in my opinion. I
I
just
do
think that
agree.
the
It's not as good. I think the first movie is in a class of its own. I do agree with you on that, but I do think this is a great sequel.
yeah, it's a really good sequel. I'm glad it exists. I just like I think the first one just hit harder. Because it was also a newer
Yeah,
concept too. It's hard. It's really hard to do make the whole like universe feel more fresh when you're doing a follow up. But again, like there's a lot
I
of
agree.
fantastic sequels to movies that are as good or not as good, but they're still fantastic, like Aliens. You know, uh, that's
Aliens,
also from a
yeah.
different director.
Yeah, Aliens is a good example.
Yeah,
Um, Blade Runner 2049.
Blade Runner 2049. I was thinking of that too. Terminator 2. I think it's better than the first one, definitely. But
I think T2 is better than T2 is better than the first film. I also think Empire is better than Star Wars.
mm,
Um,
Dark
so
Knight's better than the first one, definitely.
Batman Begins, yes, agree.
Yeah, Evil Dead 2. I like more than the first.
Groovy.
Yeah,
Yes, I agree. Yeah, Evil Dead 2 is a lot of fun. Um, yeah, there's a lot of sequels out there that I like more than the original. And again, Toy Story 2 and Toy
yeah,
Story 3. I love the first Toy Story, but I like them more. I like the sequels a little bit more.
I do too. Yeah, I go 2, 3, 1, but 3 is still like as good, or I value it just as much as the second one because it was such a great conclusion in my mind. Even though it wasn't the last movie,
Yeah.
it was still a great conclusion. Is my headcanon for it, but
Mm-hmm. I see. Yeah, 3 to me is my favorite, but because I think that's the one that utilizes all the characters the best and it has the
yeah.
best story. But yeah, yeah, I totally can see why people go for 2 because 2 is a great movie.
Yeah. You have any closing thoughts or is there any other like parts of it that you wanted to highlight that really connected with you?
I think there's other parts that really connected with me when it came to the movie. Um, like I said, the whole thing when anxiety is building the whole sense of self and the whole "I'm not good enough" mindset comes up. That really does hit hard, especially when she's on the ice skating rink, which eventually leads to her hurting her friend, and that's what causes the panic attack. Yeah, I've had that happen before too. And that hit hard for me. Um, and also the other scene, like the whole thing where anxiety and we talk about the animation thing and anxiety, that also really hits because I've been kept up awake at nights with those anxious thoughts myself. Just
Yeah.
daydreaming what might happen. So that also hit hard. But yeah, it's mainly the scenes where joy is in the back of the mind and also just the panic attack. Those were the scenes that really just crushed me. Just crushed me.
It was a great
But
coming of age story, and like
phenomenal coming of age story. Yeah.
yeah, and like I actually felt bad for Riley like throughout and stuff like that. I was like, no, don't do that, and like yeah,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
I think I kind of hated that coach too. Like she was going Terrence
Yeah.
Fletcher on her and all.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I did you notice too? Did you know that the Pixar logo or the Pixar mascot showed up in one scene? There's that scene when like she's looking inside
Yeah, I
the
did
coach's
see the
office,
Luxo
the
lamp.
Luxo
I saw
lamp.
the Luxo lamp.
I was like,
I leaned into my friend and I said, Luxo lamp. I saw that. Also, I didn't find the Pizza Planet truck or the Elio reference in the movie. I did find two A113s in the movie though.
Mm.
One was on the crane that Joy was operating, and the other is on the safe they were locked in, but it was written in Roman numerals, so it's V A X I. So it was AIXIII. You know.
Yeah. I actually wrote a list of sequel ideas for like I just did this for fun. I wrote a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
sequel ideas for Pixar originals that have not had a continuation yet. Uh, the first one I wrote was A Bug's Life: the second act, and then I wrote Ratatouille with a two in it. Yeah, no, that one's obvious, but then Wally: Recharged, and then Way Up, or AKA Up Legacy, Brave: Daddy Issues, The Great Dinosaur, Coco: Day of the Deader, Souls with an S at the end, and then Luca goes to jail, and that's it. I just whatever came to mind.
I'm surprised you didn't do one movie, The Quickening, because that's
Oh yeah,
just. I just think of that stupid title, Highlander 2: The Quickening, the greatest sequel title in the history of ever.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. Oh my god, that yeah, this was yeah. I really had fun watching both of these movies, and it was yeah. I really had fun talking with you about this. This was great.
Thank you. Thanks for being on. And wow, this is a long discussion. 4 hours and 23 minutes. I was recording this, but yeah, yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
And is there any other movies you're looking forward to this year besides like Wild Robot? I guess.
Yeah, as far as other animated films I'm looking forward to Piece by Piece. That one looks pretty cool.
Oh
The
yeah.
Pharrell Lego documentary. That Christmas looks interesting. It's a locksmith film. It's coming out on Netflix. The Day the Earth Blew Up, the Looney Tunes movie, looks pretty
Oh
cool.
yeah.
And what else is coming out that looks intriguing? Um, yeah, that's what all I can think of. Because the other animated movies that are coming to my top of my head are ones I'm not, anxious to see. Essentially,
Yeah, I can see that.
yeah, because really the only two I'm not exactly fully looking forward to are Saving Bikini Bottom, which got leaked. I haven't seen it, but I've heard really bad things about it,
Oh, me too.
Spellbound because it's Skydance and it looks like a horrible Disney ripoff, and I don't want to see another Disney ripoff in this day and age. Who does?
All my friends like watched this new SpongeBob movie, and like yeah, they were like, this is like, oh my gosh, this is like just like the bottom of the barrel of this franchise, and like, eesh, I don't want to watch that. So I think it's gonna be that's
Yeah.
on my blacklist. So I'm not gonna never gonna watch it because what else do I have to say about it that hasn't been said? And B, I don't want to. I'm just watching another bad cash grab from a franchise that's gone on for 20 plus years. So what am I really getting out of
Mm-hmm.
it?
Yeah. Yeah. I'll probably see it and review it, and you'll probably hear my thoughts on it once I see it. But
Cool.
yeah. Ugh. We'll see what happens.
Right.
We'll see what happens.
So both good movies. Both great movies, I should say. But yeah.
Yes. Great movies.
Yeah.